Hello everyone and welcome to the Guild Wars 2 podcast, the LightBringers. We are back for episode potentially 12, I think. It could be more or less than that. I'm pretty sure it's either 12 or 13. But today we are going to talk about Guild Wars 2, obviously. We're also going to talk about instance content like dungeons, strikes, fractals, and raids. So party and squad based kind of instance content. And I have some awesome guests, some new faces, different peeps that we have not seen before, and one that we have seen many times. And I'm not going to say anything more about that. Today we have on the show Lorani, Kroof, and Rocker, who have joined us. It's good to see them, and I'm going to get them to do a bit of an intro before we start talking about the things. Kroof, hello. How are you? Are you good?
I'm doing wonderful. And might I just say, I think Gorseville licked me one time. So I think that means he likes me, you know? I think we have something going on. But hi, everyone. I'm happy to be back. I'm Kroof. I do some YouTube stuff and I do some Twitch stuff. Mostly YouTube. I'm getting back into streaming and all that wonderful things. Nouns, verbs, adjectives. Yeah, thank you.
I love how you started that. Always, as usual, I was going to say from the heart, but when I was doing that, I was like, I'm not Doctor Who.
No, it's not from the heart. It's from the appendix. Yeah.
Okay, cool. What if you don't have an appendix? Like, what do you do? I don't know. You can think about that.
Buy one on layaway?
Why would you want to buy an appendix if you had it removed? Seems like the worst thing to do. Okay, Kroof. Amazing to have you here again. Thank you very much. As per usual. Rocker, hello. How are you? What's going on? Tell us what you do. What you do? Are you good?
Well, I mean, I don't really do much anymore, if I'm honest. I used to be a streamer in the Guild Wars 2 scene. You may know me if you're a bit of a boomer, but yeah, nowadays I just hang in podcasts and occasionally try to join one if I get invited. So thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to a great podcast.
Awesome. It's great to have you here, man. Good peeps indeed. So, as well, we have, I'm going to say Lara, because I think Lara is the, I don't know, you said it was okay to call you Lara, is that okay?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay, awesome. How are you doing today?
As long as you don't say Laura,
Laura.
With AU.
Oh, no.
When yeah.
I can kind of read sometimes, although the stream might tell you that I can't. So that is also something that could happen. Reading is hard. Yeah, see? There you go. Laura, do you want to tell us a little bit about your stream, when you stream, what you do on Twitch and whatnot?
Totally.
Cool.
Hey everyone, I'm Lorenzi. I like Guild Wars 2. I used to just be like a YouTuber, but last year I got into Twitch, which has been super fun. You know, I used to just make one video every 3 months, so I never really felt like I got to know people. But Twitch has been really cool. You know, I'm just talking to people, and I even got invited to an amazing podcast today. This is dreams come true. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No, absolutely big pleasure to have you here and everyone here as per usual. So, this is a topic I wasn't sure about. I was not sure about this topic at all. Chat as well, hello. We are doing this live on twitch.tv/JebroUnity. It is every 2 weeks on a Friday. Today is the 23rd of April, so you will be able to maybe think about coming here live. If you're listening on Spotify or anyone else listening to it on anyone else, leave that to the imagination. Anchor.fm/Jebro as well. And you can come and listen to all the things, even live as well. So thank you very much for coming. If you have anything you want to say in chat and you want to ask questions, or look at the chat from time to time, but the main focus is here on the people we have in the room. So if you feel free to make comments and stuff, and maybe we can talk about what you're talking about as well. So I was doing my schoolwork last night. I'm in university, of course.
Studious.
Yes, and then I was like, I want to finish this. So I was in that kind of mood of research, right? I'm looking at things, and because we're talking about raids and dungeons and fractals and strikes and whatnot, I was like, okay, so Dungeons came out with the launch of Guild Wars 2. And I was looking on their YouTube channel and I was like, did they hype up Dungeons much? I remember they kind of went through it on a live stream once or twice. But other than that, this is the only thing I had that I could find. I'm going to show it on stream as well. But all it is the intro to
You're the reinforcements.
Ascalonian Catacombs.
Have to do.
Pre-launch on the YouTube channel for Guild Wars 2. This was like the only content I could find other than live streams.
And I don't want your
That is like a really epic cutscene, though.
It is. It is
It's
very
just-
good. Go on, sorry, Laura.
It doesn't really talk about like what dungeons are.
No,
I know.
it was like the only thing. What I was trying to do was I was trying to come up with some kind of idea as to why they didn't kind of continue with dungeons. So if you're new to Guild Wars 2 and you're listening to this and you're wondering what's Jebro talking about, they have got different instant content in Guild Wars 2. Dungeons, which is just a party of people, and then you've got Fractals, which is the same, but they're very, very much shorter. And there's a difficulty scaling as well. There's somewhat of a difficulty scaling in dungeons, obviously, as well. And then you've got raids, obviously, which is 10 person, and then you've got strikes, which is 10 person as well, but shorter. And yeah, this is kind of what the podcast is going to be about today. So I'm just going to ask these awesome people their opinions about all the things, but that's all I could really find on their YouTube. Like, there was literally nothing else, and I was just very surprised by it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe dungeons were actually a fairly late addition to Guild Wars 2, right? And I haven't really been following stuff so closely back then, but I think to have had this talk before, where people said that dungeons were basically kind of like last minute, a little bit rushed to create some sort of PvE endgame, which was still kind of lacking when they were going to release Guild Wars 2. So
Dungeons were with release, yeah. They were in the game.
Yeah, they were with release, but like they weren't,
But
they were
prior to
apparently
release.
one of the fairly late things they got to work on. So like they had a little bit less development time maybe than other things. And I'm not 100% sure, so call me out on this. If this
I do
if this-
actually I do remember that
incorrect.
in the first like ever trailer they released for the game, like the big teaser trailer, there was like a bit where they showed Ascon Catacombs,
Yeah.
like people running down the staircase. I think you might be right though. Like
I'm
Or
not
maybe
It
I'm
feels like
completely
everyone was
wrong.
always-
I'm absolutely not sure about this, but I just
Yeah.
in the context of you saying that these didn't get really hyped up, it just came back to me too. That I think somebody said this to me before.
This is the thing. It's like, well, that trailer was like easily a year plus, like from when they released the game. Like this was June 2011. So I think Dungeons was something they were very excited about during their live streams. Like I remember seeing footage about it, like on stream and stuff, and then talking about it. And I got excited because that Ascalonian Catacombs was the first thing I saw, because you didn't need to have, because it wasn't like advertised as Guild Wars 2 Trinity, right? It wasn't like tank, healer, support, whatever, damage. It was more like, you can run through this dungeon, you can have your own heals. And I think that's how they advertised Guild Wars 2 a little bit when they did talk about dungeons. It was like, you can play your own way kind of thing. Because we didn't know
Yeah, to
toughness was the tank stat, basically.
To comment on what Reader Geek says, like, I think you would have to define what you mean by early in terms of like in the studios. If like right before they were actually talking about Guild Wars 2, it was the last thing they worked on, that could be the case. But I remember them, and they do have videos of like showing off the dungeon weapons for Ascalon Catacombs, and particularly pinpointing how this weapon set changes depending on the day and the night. And they actually showed that back when they had the energy system on every single
Yeah.
class. So it was, they talked about it. I don't remember them like waiting a whole long time to talk about it, but it could be the case where dungeons might have been one of the final things they worked on before talking about the game, perhaps. I don't have any knowledge on that. But if that's the whisperings in the wind, that could be.
I may be completely wrong. I
don't know.
You're making me doubt myself more and more. So like,
Yeah.
I'm really not sure about this.
It's 'cause
But the
pre-
thing is,
pre-release.
even if they did show off stuff early though, especially like weapon skins or maybe like a part of the setting of the dungeon itself, that doesn't mean that necessarily the dungeon was done early on. right? That can just mean
True.
that they had
True.
like, you know, they had
Yeah.
the concepts done, they had the maybe the layouts of the rooms done, but the actual coding may still have happened fairly late, right? So maybe that's where that's coming from, but I really don't know, and I wouldn't feel comfortable at this point to make any claims about when dungeons were developed or anything.
I definitely think they want us to have dungeons like in the game from very early on, because they were talking about the sets and showing like some concept art and stuff. But again, I guess we have no clue when they actually like worked on them and actually made them work.
I guess
that's the thing, though.
So are you saying that because you're not sure, like Rocket? Is there a feeling that dungeons weren't really done? I'm trying to say this in a way, but I'm going to say my opinion on dungeons very, very quickly to kind of set maybe a tone. But I actually really like dungeons in Guild Wars 2. I actually really like them. The only reason I don't do them is because of the raw rewards of them. Which is, why, I mean, obviously you play a game to enjoy the content and everything else, but a lot of it is the rewards for me that kind of is the issue, and probably why they didn't get played that much. And I think that's really the only thing that I'm sad about. But I'm not sure if anyone wants to pipe in and say how much if they enjoy dungeon, if they dislike dungeons at all, or...
Well, I guess I'll also pipe in and say, like, I really love dungeons, especially right now, because I've recently gone back and played a bunch of dungeons with my friends on stream and stuff. And it's been a wonderful experience. It's definitely a different experience current day because the balancing is so different. Elite specializations drastically change combat, how easy and hard things are. And playing the early dungeons in particular are a lot of fun, and they definitely give you a sense of nostalgia. But I think as a whole, I would have preferred if they maybe focused a bit more on a soft trinity, because especially back in the day, it was pretty much damage and that's it.
Yeah.
And part of me would have liked some of a more traditional idea on how to structure a game and how roles are actually executed. And I feel as the dungeons went on, when you got to higher levels, they like or in particular feels almost unfinished, or like they had so many plans for it, but it didn't necessarily come to fruition in the end. But as a whole, I think dungeons are a fantastic mode in Guild Wars 2, and I still find enjoyment in it today.
And that's kind of the thing, right? Is when I said earlier that they may have been started on to develop fairly late, but I'm not doubting that they were always planned, right? I absolutely believe they were always planned, and I'm not doubting that at all. But dungeons do have a history of being buggy. Dungeons do have a history of a lot of boss AI being broken, terrain being broken until this day, because they were never quite able to finish it. They had, as far as I know, a very small number of devs actually work on them. And I think the dungeon code, like the whole spaghetti code meme, if you've been around, right? Like that persists to this day, and one of the big reasons why we assume that dungeons don't get updated anymore, and even why people speculate the reason why they went to Fractals is actually in part because the devs that created the dungeons moved on from the studio fairly early around, before Heart of Thorn, so they weren't really able to easily patch this time in a time efficient manner anymore, to the point where it's even not even really worth to continue the entire format, right? So so I think there are some points to be made maybe in that aspect, that they maybe were a little bit lackluster in terms of development and how much time there maybe was and resources were spent on them. But regardless, I love dungeons, right? Dungeons were how I basically got into PvE and into instance content. I imagine most people got into content. It is the earliest available sort of instance group content in the game, right? Except for maybe story. But so I loved it. I loved back in the day that the every guild used to do 2 nights a week. They used to do training runs for dungeons. That was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, and you had all the paths and stuff. I mean, some people have said, I read a geek, and some others have said that there is. The only problem with the dungeons is they are quite long. They're longer, so it takes a while to create that content as well. It would have taken significantly longer than like a Fractal, which is around now, obviously. And like you said, I think I was trying to find information about the people who worked on the dungeon. I think you're right that they did move on. I'm not sure if they did it. I don't know about not continuing stuff because people move on. I'm not sure about that, but
again, this is, I mean, the thing is, I can't say anything about this confirmed, obviously, right? I haven't talked to the devs or anything about it.
Like talk,
but this, I mean, this just used to always like kind of be the common perception of, well, the spaghetti codes, right? Like, and they can't fix them, so we move on to Fractals, right? But that's
I'm not sure that's
more of a unconfirmed rumor kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we all know that as well. In terms of Guild Wars 2, there's definitely some stuff that they wish they had done differently in terms of coding and stuff like that, you know. And I think that's true of pretty much most MMORPGs as well. Probably, I know it's true for ESO. I know it's true for Final Fantasy 14. I know it's true for WoW, obviously, because they've just been around for so long, and different tech comes out that you need to, you know, adjust and implement, and you can't because of things in the past. So it is difficult.
Hindsight is 2020.
That's true.
I also just feel like the thing with dungeons also was that when they first came out, I feel like you could. I think I'm remembering this correctly, but I think you could waypoints even while other people were like in combat. Like this was literally like the first like 2 months of the game or something. So I feel like it's hard to say like how these dungeons were like properly designed, you know, when you stress test them, when you like throw players in that are really trying to be super good and are trying to like speed run these. I feel like this was, you know, Arena's first attempt at making instance content like this. And then something else that I thought happened a lot was people just running the short paths. And then I guess Fractals was kind of a nice way to sort of like take a look back at all the things that went well, all the things that went wrong, and then try to like create some new framework that works well.
And then, funny enough, right, the way Fractal started out, if you remember the kind of RNG path that you chose, people still did the same thing, right? People would like queue in all the time to get to always start on Swampland so that you have the shortest possible time investment.
That's the thing.
Time investment in MMOs I find to be so strange. Just as
you don't
I guess
want to get me on
I'm a
this
type
rant.
of person.
Don't get me on this rant. Don't get me on the rant.
Never come down this road with me. It shall be fun. We have candy. But I like when I'm playing an MMO to feel invested. And I guess it just might be, you know, where I was young, you know, not many responsibilities and all that stuff. But of course, growing up and growing older, you begin to realize that not everybody has a lot of time. But when it comes to MMOs, I don't necessarily mind having longer form content and really intricate, or depending on the work, it might not be super intricate, but things that can take time. And it's playing an MMO, when a lot of people try to go for the shortest thing, it feels like you yourself are being pulled in that direction where you have to kind of play the shortest thing because that's the most efficient and that's the thing everybody's doing. So it doesn't really matter if you like the long content. It's harder to find people to actually do it with you sometimes. So I think overall it's smarter to make a bit shortened content where it doesn't take necessarily like 2 hours to complete.
I think you raise a great point there, and I think that's actually one of the big strengths of dungeons, right? Regardless of like they're very variable in how much time you can spend on them, right? Like because you can have just like 30 minutes and do 1 or 2 quick dungeons, but you could also back in the day do like your whole 5-hour dungeon tour or something, right? Or like do your daily 2 to 3 hour dungeon tour, and I think this ties into like also the daily system, because dungeons back in the day weren't. You didn't have your 3 daily dungeons that you do like you do with Fractals, but instead you had the choice to do all of them, and you'd get good rewards if you do all of them, or you can fit them to your own schedule, right? And like cut down your time tonight because you have other plans or something.
Dungeons, so they did release the dungeons, and then that was it basically. But like, just thinking about, and just quickly, did people have a favorite dungeon? Like Lara, do you have a favorite dungeon that you like, or is it like
yes,
been so long? You do. Okay, good. I was hoping
my
people
favorite
remember.
dungeon, and I feel incredibly unoriginal even saying this.
okay.
But it has to be Ascon Catacombs, because that's the one I ran over and over and over. At some point, I wanted to make lots of goals, so I started to solo one of the dungeon paths. So I had like a whole build that was like specifically for that path, and then in the end, I would like invite people from LFG, and they would pay me, and then I would kill the boss. And that was how I made goals. Just like doing
You
the
were running
same
a company.
Catacombs path over and over.
You
That
got
was
paid for dungeon runs.
yeah.
How much gold did you get?
It wasn't even that much because
Back
I
then,
was very good, so it took me a while. But it was just fun.
Make that
you know.
money.
I think also a big thing about dungeons nowadays is people do them for fun, really, right? Because the
Yeah.
money rewards aren't that good.
Yeah.
But you used to, I think it was like 1 gold per path every time. And it was like one of the best farms in the game at the time. Like there was no silver waste, there was no, all these maps that people farm.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people also just did dungeons because they wanted their legendary, so that's why they would focus on these short ones. But nowadays it's like we're going back and we're realizing, hey, these were actually pretty fun content, some fun stuff in there.
And back in the day, there was 2 or 3 dungeons. Was Citadel of Flame, which was like the Berserker set, right? I think most people
Yeah.
went for that, and a lot of people wanted to have because back in the day, like on release, there wasn't many good dungeon sets. There wasn't many good looking sets, and there wasn't really a wardrobe. And I think,
Especially with like particle effects. So if you had
Yeah.
like something that has little flame out of the shoulder, that was a
it.
big deal.
That was
right?
the
Yeah.
only thing that had anything. It was like I think the only shiny thing was maybe the achievement rewards, and that wasn't until 30k or whatever. And
And back in the day, they would call that swag.
it was. It was though, crew. Like getting the helmet, in the shoulders, and then all that kind of stuff. And I remember the ore dungeon as well. That was pretty nice as well because it was
That was top tier.
and stuff. That was
That was the
top
legendary
tier.
armor of the time.
It was look-wise, and you used to farm the maps, the end game like core maps for those different temple sets as well that you would get for like World v World and PvE and stuff. And I remember doing that. A lot.
I think farming the Ra armor set was like the first goal I had in the game. Like the very first, like I hit 80, no idea what gear is, no idea, like I got my first exotic set from map exploration, random scramble together pieces, and then it was just like, okay, Ra skins, they look cool. That's what I want to go for.
And also just, I think Ara was like honestly the only really hard content in the game, right? Like nowadays we kind of look back at it and it's like, oh, it's just a dungeon. But I remember I was scared to do Ara. I was like, you want to do Ara? And I was like, I'm not good enough to do Ara. That was like,
Gigantic Lupicus.
I'd still say it would be challenging for most people.
Lupicus
I think
kept
even
it, like,
now,
up to this day, it's the benchmark for try-hard players. It's like, you can't do solo Lupicus, right? Like if you've, every try-hard player worth their salt has had to solo Lupicus at some point.
There's
right?
still videos on that. I see people still doing that. A lot
of the old school dungeon runners like still, very regularly do Lupicus.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay. So Laura's was Ascalon and Catacombs. Rocker, favorite one?
I'd probably say Ara for the same reason that Lara said. That's what I have the fondest memories of. The person who initially taught me dungeons, like we'd at some point start duoing Ara P1 and 2, and sell those on the LFG for like a few gold.
Nice.
So
like a dungeon seller reunion over here.
I didn't even know
back in the day, that like a lot of people did that, right? It's not like you had like your elite 5 players who did dungeon cells, right? A lot of players did them, and it was quite available, right? If you research the topic a little bit, then you could fairly quickly, right? I would say like you could start, just duoing that with a friend and selling 3 spots And since a lot of new players, the first thing they look up is how do I make gold the most efficiently, right? I think that got a lot of people into kind of becoming better at the game and doing dungeons, caring about builds and gear and stuff a little bit more.
Yeah.
Capitalism.
Cruyff, what's your favorite one? Honestly,
I would probably agree with Laura. I mean, Ascalon Catacombs was fantastic, but also Roka. Like, I love Ara, and I think the first and the last, just despite how I feel about Ara, and I would have liked it to be so much more, and maybe like actually fight Zaitan or go to Zaitan's corpse, which was shown in like the first trailer. Like, there could have been more things, but I still think the first and the last dungeons, it's just a nice bookend and just encapsulates the whole entire Guild Wars 2 experience for launch.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I actually really liked Honor the Waves. That was my favorite one. I like that one. Yeah.
But that one has an underwater boss fight in one of the parts.
I know. It's because it
do
encompassed everything as well. That's why I liked it at the time, because I liked the different things you could do like at the time, and I didn't mind underwater combat as well. Not as much now. I don't really care about it, but it's more like, I think it's because you could do different things. I think I just have like memories of that, because I felt like that was one of the harder ones as you kind of were playing the game and leveling up. Like, I think that's where dungeons were the best for me, leveling up and just like being like, oh, I'm at this level, I don't know what the hell, how to play the game at all, what's the field, do you know what I mean? When I was learning, I didn't know all this stuff, like the boons, like what are the best boons to have, the best type of gear, and like you didn't really properly know that stuff until you were like, level 80 and you were actually properly trying to learn the game. And well, me anyway. And it was just like, I remember playing that with our guild and like, just doing these different parts. I remember doing Citadel of Flame a lot to get the gear for that. Because at the first I was playing Mesmer. So Mesmer was like my main class, which is, might sound weird because I play Engineer obviously mainly now, but now I play just everything. So it doesn't matter. But yeah, no, that was my favorite. That and Citadel of Flame, I think. But yeah, I think AC... Definitely Ascalon and Catacombs. I have a lot of memories just starting that and being like, oh, whoa, the first Guild Wars 2 dungeon, and there's like traps, and there's, the bosses, and there's ghosts, and it's got a little bit of, Guild Wars 1 in there, and it's like, it was pretty
And
cool.
it demolished me on launch. Like, Ascalonian Cola,
Yes.
I remember being stuck on Cola for a good 3 to 5 hours without even getting him below his first 20% on like the first week of launch or something.
Absolutely.
That is actually like a crazy experience I've been having recently. I've been doing this permadeath challenge. So I'm trying to get to level 80 with friends without dying.
Oh, yes.
And we decided to do these dungeons in this challenge. And it's been like some of the most fun content. Like just
You're
like
doing
looking at the bosses and trying to not die in permadeath.
Is this the wooden potatoes? Is this the wooden potatoes Iron Man challenge, or is this one you?
I don't think it's specifically the same as his. It's just permadeath. The thing I find so wild about it is I remember like wiping on these Ascalon Catacombs boss fights like over and over and over, and now I'm just going in and we're not using elite specializations. We're like level 35, right? But it feels so much easier now. It feels like our understanding of the game has sort of leveled up over the years.
Oh, for sure.
And I find it hard to even believe, thinking back to like going in at like level 35, because you lack so many traits, and so like you're far from playing a proper build at that point, right? So
exactly. Yeah, I like the permadeath
legendary
runs.
troll.
I've done that a few times. It's a challenge, that's for sure.
What would be your least favorite dungeon? I just want to know. I don't like Crucible of Eternity.
Same.
I think that was long, isn't it? It's a bit confusing.
I think that I've only done it like once or twice in the entire time I've been playing this game.
There was you had to farm that for for the gear, I think, for some kind of build back in the day. I'm pretty sure. Or there was an item you needed to get, or a rune set, maybe.
Maybe. I don't actually remember.
I never got it.
Well, you need to do. Is it Ascalonian Catacombs for Monk Rune, or is it?
Yeah,
AC's Monk.
Right, yeah, because it's the only way to get it. Apparently, I was like, I've got 4 Monk Runes randomly. Why have I got 4 Monk Runes? Oh yeah, right, okay. Probably need to do AC or do the PvP reward track and get the things. But yeah,
Least favorite is difficult though. I would probably say Honor of the Waves if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Well, we're all gonna like the same
And I
thing.
love you, Jeffro, right? And
No. We don't. You don't have to like and dislike the same things. It's okay. This is good.
like I like it aesthetically, and I see what you're saying, what you like about it, right? But I don't like the underwater stuff. The underwater crap it doesn't work for me, right? And there are a few parts in there that where you just like have like this little pathway with the knockbacks that you have to very narrowly evade, that kind of stuff. I've bad experiences with that. I'm not a good player, like yeah, you would say a lot of people have given me that tip as well, but so to this day I haven't quite figured out how that works yet. So
awesome.
Lovely.
Hates on otherwise. Got it. Laura.
Roka is never coming back from this podcast.
Terrible.
Laura. I'm so sorry. Forgive me.
No. It's fine. It's absolutely, people don't like it. I know loads of people don't like it. It's more of, it's a memory thing for me because I remember like the struggles we have as a guild and getting through it was like a big hype moment for us. Like I remember us getting excited about getting through it because we were mumbling.
And isn't it interesting how huge a factor that actually plays? Because I think it's the same for me, right? The reason I say Ara is my favorite is not because I like the aesthetics the most. It's definitely not because I like the aesthetics the most of the dungeon, but it's just because that's where I have like the fondest memories, right? The best experiences where I feel like I've made some good moments as a player of a game, right? Or like where I evolved personally a lot as a player.
Exactly.
So it's really more based on memory and personal experiences.
Certainly. Lara, which is the one you dislike the most? And Crew asked this question. Now I can't remember.
I think it has to be Crucible of Eternity as well, and that's not. I honestly don't even know why. It's just I
don't like the name.
No, but I remember you had to do like some pre-event to open it back in the day. Like
yes,
it was really annoying, so I just didn't do it at all.
Is it on the bridge? Oh no, there was loads of. That was the same as Citadel of Fame as well. That was the
Citadel of Flame had the bridge one. Crucible of Eternity, I think, was like the Asuran lab, and like you had to go through the different lanes and like Mordramoth, and that was where the hint was. So.
And I remember when
so much work.
Griffin came out, like people started to discover that you could somehow like fly in there, and if you like flew at exactly the right angle into the instance, you could like quickly press the button to get in without having to do the event.
Someone's talking about Scampi in the chat. It's making me really hungry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm so hungry. I want like a pasta dish with some Scampi.
I love Scampi, man.
That'll be delicious.
Scampi and chips. It's a very English thing as well.
Fish and chips.
There's story to the Scampi that feels
yeah. Just before we move on from dungeons as well, just talking about LFG, which was I think was released, or as far as I can tell, like we're talking about beta in a YouTube video where I found when I was researching around kind of late-ish November or like final quarter of November, and it was the LFG in 2013, which was a year later, because you would just ask in map chat. And you would just ask in map chat or whatever guild you were in at the time. There was no way to really get into dungeons, which is kind of what it's like in every MMO until they put like an auto LFG in, right? Like what Warcraft and other games. Yeah, it was a bit. But this LFG was very manual still. But I actually forgot that if you go up to the NPC outside a dungeon, if you go to the LFG, it automatically goes to like that section. It goes to the dungeon section, and I think it literally just goes all the way straight to this, rather than having to navigate all the stuff on the left. You have to pull down like dungeons and then which one or whatever. I completely forgot about that, but you can't do that now. Obviously unless you go to the dungeon itself, you kind of have to manually do these things. I've often wondered about whether or not having and there's loads of different opinions about this, but it's worth thinking about because this is more of a general topic for everything. How do you all feel about like LFGs, but more of the automatic put you in a group thing rather than kind of organizing it yourself? Do you feel like that's something that Guild Wars 2 maybe or Arena have maybe missed out on, or do you think it's good that people have the opportunity to kind of arrange groups and maybe the way they like, but how does it affect like accessibility for people, I guess, is something I wonder about. If anyone has a burning desire to pipe in on this, then feel free.
And you mean like a
We all
hot
talk.
join, right?
Well, like, you know,
I just
like,
want to make sure you mean like a hot join, not the LFG that's
hot
currently
join.
in the
Yeah,
game.
yeah, sorry, like
but
an
hot
LFG.
join.
I want to join,
join,
and you
yeah.
just get queued in, and eventually
yeah.
you're in there with four other people.
That's a better way to say it. Hot join, yeah. Compared to the LFG we have right now.
I actually think it's very interesting because it feels like recently ArenaNet has been sort of experimenting with like the sort of hot join stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's like a daily strike. I know we'll talk about strikes later, but there's like a public instance you can join, so you don't have to like go on LFG. I personally like LFG more because it feels a little bit more social to me. It doesn't feel like I'm just going into content. I'm not talking to these people. Like I like the little bit at the start where you're just like, I'm playing this class, and then they're like, okay. And I know I've met some cool friends just talking to them, and I feel like these sort of public instances or like hot join things kind of take away from that a little bit. I don't know.
Okay.
I think a few years back, I would have taken the route of like the classic WoW type where no LFG, no nothing. You have to socialize. You have to stand outside of the dungeon.
Yes.
I don't know what I was on. I don't know what I was thinking. Absolutely not. I would have to agree. I like the LFG system, though I wouldn't be opposed to there being like a hot join system just because it's so easy and accessible. But Guild Wars 2 is a different game because everything's fairly instanced. So it's not like a true open world where you're out and about. Like, to me, it feels a little bit different since everything's already so instance based to the point where I think the LFG system is a welcomed social aspect because I feel like it does promote more discussion because you actually have to look at what they want, what they're asking for, and then from there someone joins, and then you get the snowball of talking of like, what roles do you want, and that can snowball into other topics of like friendship, or you mess up, and it kind of breaks the ice for you rather than just instantly going in and then being like, okay, I guess I'll talk. So it's a nice icebreaker.
Okay. Cool.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say that I think it's actually really important that they should add something like this. I actually think it would be an excellent feature because being like a long-term raider, one of the biggest problems I see in Guild Wars 2 raids and a lot of content really about the LFG is that the LFG community sets high standards for people to join. And it's really deterring for new players to get into it because like if you want to join a raid in Guild Wars 2 and you don't have 150 LI, well, you better start looking for a Discord to organize a training run for you because otherwise you're not getting in, right? Like there's no way to get in. And the same thing is true for dungeons because you have two groups of people doing dungeons nowadays, and that's like the ultra tryhards, like the SC leaders, who will literally solo the thing ahead of you while you're like at the beginning talking to the NPC. They'll be on the final boss soloing it, right? And you'll lose the entire experience. I've seen a lot of people complain about that you get into a dungeon and people rush ahead because they're just so much more experienced. And on the other hand, you have like, well, no people at all, or, you know, very, very new players as well. And that's probably the best case you can have if you're yourself a new player, right? Is if you get into a group that is on the same level of experience. But like if you were able to just queue in, I think that would reduce a lot of barriers for new players and also this, I think a hot join system like that comes with possibilities to like kind of set restrictions of who can join. And I think in a weird way that actually removes toxicity from the game is when you are able to set how experienced you want somebody to be in a dungeon, you know, then you don't have to set high LI requirements, or back in the day, high AP requirements, right? Like you can just say, I want somebody who's already finished this dungeon once before, and you kind of get around that, right? In a much less toxic way than if you just let people kind of take care of that by themselves. That, in my experience, that just always leads to a more negative environment than if the game just gives you kind of a way to filter who you want to play with a bit. I think there's a lot of possibilities in a hot join system, but I'll also say that there's probably a big reason why Guild Wars 2 isn't really good at that stuff is because Guild Wars 2 doesn't have the hard-to-find trinity, right? You can't join on a healer and be like, okay, well, now the LFG recognizes that our group has a healer. You could have a person go in, or you could accidentally end up with three, like a guardian, a ranger, and and an engineer, and they're all playing heal builds, and the game wouldn't know, right? So
yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
That's the
I
thing.
think that is
be-
something.
Be ways to circumvent it. Oh,
No.
I might have lagged out a little bit. There could be ways maybe to circumvent that with like
Mhm.
elite specializations if they actually like classify an elite spec as a certain role. So when you equip that elite spec, you are the healer, you are the damage, you are the tank or the control person.
and then
No,
where
it
would you
still is
start,
weird
right?
though.
Because they don't,
there's
in
so
their
much
entire philosophy, they don't
inside.
want this, right? It's like kind of against what they want in the first place. If they set you to, to require a healer and a tank, like for example in Final Fantasy, if you join a dungeon, you require a tank, you require a healer,
Yeah.
and you require 2 DPS. That's all you can join on. There's no possibility to go in on 3 healers, right? And in Guild Wars 2, that would be unthinkable, right? You couldn't possibly have like an LFG requirement that only starts the dungeon once a tank queues up, right? So
Mm-hmm. I think this is actually something interesting that Elder Scrolls does. I haven't played it too much, but I once saw the dungeon queue in Elder Scrolls, and then you can just kind of click whether you are a healer or a DPS or what's it even called, tank, which is like interesting because like you just get to pick that yourself. So like if you're a guardian who is like healer, you just click healer. If you're DPS, you click DPS. I think it's kind of interesting.
You can do that in WoW, Final Fantasy 14, in most fair amount of MMOs. Like you can do that. I think that's.
Final Fantasy is just based on your class. In Final Fantasy, if you're on a tank, it enters you on a tank. If you're on a DPS, there's no variety in that game at all when it comes to that.
Oh, fair enough.
But then I feel like every single class would need to be able to have utility or skills to like fully complete those needs. Like Mesmer, I don't think has a great healing ability when compared to other professions.
It would just be a support, wouldn't it? It would just be like more of a supportive kind of distortion-y kind of boon build like it is in raids forever.
But they could do that, like self-select and you self-assign your role. I think that is something that they genuinely could and maybe should do and like at least try it. But would people grief and they'd be like, I'm a healer, and then they're like, I don't heal.
I've used the wrong thing.
Or maybe that's just me.
I'm actually a DPS.
And again, like just like what you talked about, Roka, like philosophy. Like when dungeons were first added, the whole philosophy was that Guild Wars 2 didn't need a trinity like that, right? And only over the years it has sort of come back, and like raids made it into the game. And now we're all like looking for tanks and healers and stuff. But especially at the start of the game, Trinity was just non-existent in a way.
I think it's because in Guild Wars 2 as well, you had your own heal. Was actually a big thing? Like it wasn't actually a big thing in any MMO.
Design philosophy, exactly. They wanted that on purpose, right? They wanted you to be independent of that of the Trinity, right? And
I remember that was one of the big selling points. Like, hey, you remember Guild Wars 1? You always had to wait to get a monk in your party. You won't have to wait. You can just play with anyone. That's like the big thing, kind of.
And
no, wait until you have a Mesmer in your party.
It's.
But I think overall, it maybe muddled and muddied the philosophy of actual game design, because not only are they saying you don't necessarily need to wait for these things, they're also saying you can play whatever you want, and then it kind of becomes this weird middle ground of like no one's actually really doing a role, at least in Classic, because everyone was mostly just trying to go for damage, kill it the fastest, and clear it as much as you can. Because the content it wasn't requiring you to have a healer or have a tank. So even if you wanted to play those things, you were more so crippling your group than anything else, because you weren't necessarily useful in that role that you wanted to play, that they said that you could play whatever you want. So it kind of just slotted everyone into one thing. But thankfully over the years, it's, as we've mentioned, it's like grown into something more. And I think they should maybe just make a statement and like have a more clearer definition of their game design if they are going to move forward with this software trinity where a class can go into any of these three. It seems to be like an unspoken change that they have been making, but maybe a more clear message would be better if they just shifted more harshly and all that stuff. I don't know. something that I think about
I
sometimes.
think it's mostly just us talking about, theory crafting, whether or not this is the thing. So if they were to do that, then yeah. But I think personally, like, I'm going to give my opinion and we kind of move on because there is a lot to talk about. I always pack so many things into one show and just split it up. But like, the thing is, as all three of you have talked about it, you've changed my mind. It's a bit difficult. But I think I'm kind of split because I kind of agree. I don't think anyone's disagreeing with each other. We're just talking about. But I kind of agree with having some kind of. I feel like LFG does. It doesn't invite everyone to get involved, that's for sure. Because I think you're right. You join a party and people are like, need that legendary insight, which is what Rocco was saying. If you don't know what legendary insight is, because you've just joined the game, it's basically a currency you get from bosses in raids where you get a kill and you get this thing. And then people spam in the chat and say, oh, I've got experience from killing things, or achievements, whatever. And that, like, if you're a new player, like, you're never going to get in. You're just never going to get into an LFG raid unless it's specifically a training raid, and then you have to go outside of the game and you have to find training guilds, you have to find training discords, you have to go out of the game, you have to get to know people, and that's cool. It's not in the game, and that's one of the reasons why raids are probably one of the lowest or smallest communities maybe in the game. I know obviously we see people playing raids on Twitch, we obviously see people there's LFGs up, there's all this kind of stuff, but it's a content which is played probably not the most because there's just not actually that much access to it, even though we see it on Twitch and whatnot, because we've got the communities which allow us to actually do these things, you see. And we raid now casually on a Saturday. You can play whatever build you want, I don't actually care. As long as we've got like some
as long as it's the meta build.
People definitely
play whatever out of these 10 builds.
People play whatever they want, and like I do play a meta build, and some people do, and because they want, we want to have might and all this kind of stuff, and we talk about what people are playing, but we've been getting through content, saying that you can play raids casually as a big group, and it's just, you just accept that, you're going to kill something, you're not going to kill something, and you enjoy the experience, which is like just playing with your friends, which is what we do. But, we do that because I've got a community and that allows me to do that. But otherwise, if I was a single player playing this and I wasn't in the guild, I wouldn't ever be able to access it. But you could argue, that's just the way it is kind of thing. And maybe that would be the case in most games. But obviously in Final Fantasy 14, in WoW, not in ESO, you can queue for raids, and you can queue for dungeons in Hotjoin, but like people said, you don't talk to these people. Like, I've played WoW retail, and I've Hotjoined solo, and I've probably said about 2 or 3 words to people in dungeons, and I've just been sad about it. I'm like, oh. No one said even GG at the end. It's like everyone said like, good job, well done. Everyone says like, sometimes the odd person will say something, but like it feels like I'm playing with AI sometimes. It's just like, it doesn't really, so it does kind of remove that LFG experience. But even in LFG, when you've got into a group, people are just focused on farming and getting it done. So it's like, I don't know. Yeah. I feel like there could be LFG should just exist as it is, and maybe have an optional hot zone. But then again, I don't know. Like Rocker says, the tech would be difficult, but like maybe you could queue for a specific role, like Laura said, which is a good point as well, because they wouldn't have to detect anything, but you would have to make sure that person was definitely playing a healing build and just not like playing DPS and they click tank like they do in ESO, and they're just like run through, and you're like, oh, they just wanted to get in the queue, and we're just gonna have to manage with this, because that happens a lot.
Probably check stats.
There's one more point about like about the hot joins that I'd like to bring up that is really inspired by Final Fantasy, since that game came out before, and I happen to play that myself quite a bit. It's that it's like a nice way to repopulate kind of all the dungeons that people play as they level up, because a lot of new players, it's the first group content you get confronted with, and if you reach level 30 and you're excited, oh dude, I can go into a dungeon now, and then you enter the LFG and all of them are either level 80 groups, like you very rarely find a story group there, and then maybe you wait for like 5 hours or something, until eventually you find a few more people to join you. I think that these kind of hot join systems could actually repopulate that a bit. And especially in Final Fantasy, it's actually tied to like a daily system where if you do, it's called daily dungeon roulettes. If you do a dungeon roulette, a leveling roulette, then you get into one random old dungeon, and 50%, 90% of the time, there's going to be one player in there who's doing it for the first time because they're doing it through their story progress. And if that system wasn't there, then these players would have unnatural cues. It would be impossible to play that content. And that's how it pretty much is today in Final Fantasy, in Guild Wars 2, I think. It's like it's very difficult to play a story dungeon as you just organically level in Guild Wars 2, just because it's so unpopulated nowadays.
I do like that Final Fantasy 14 system. I remember
they do have a
remarking
good
on that.
LFG.
It was good. It was good, especially as a new player, and also like you couldn't skip the cutscene unless they wanted to, right? And it would just play.
If somebody's watching the cutscene, the dungeon doesn't start until it does. Yeah,
that's pretty good. That is good, actually. It's true. Because in ESO, unfortunately, you know, if you want to learn the story and everything else, they can just go ahead and just finish the dungeon before you even get a chance, and that's a big issue over there, unfortunately. So you've just got to play with friends and just be like, you know, or play with a group and be like, you know, I'd appreciate some patience while I read through like the awesome story, because ESO does have great story as well. Which is why you want to check out the quest and like actually talk to NPCs and stuff. Okay, we're going to move on because Dungeons has been a long one, apparently. LFG as well. LFG is actually the thing we've been stuck on, but it's good conversation. I like it. I'm going to show...
It's an interesting topic, right?
Yeah, LFG is a big thing I've wanted to have a lot for a long time, and it's... Yeah, I still think the LFG as it is a really good way for people to interact, but I think it's very much a system which people don't engage in because of like the toxicity that exists at times, and it's dangerous because Guild Wars 2 isn't supposed to be like that. It's probably the least toxic in terms of like the way that it's advertised and the way they, you know, they want to be open to all different kinds of people and communities. It's kind of works against their ethos as a company, I think.
It's like a paradox. It's like the less you restrict people and the more you try to give them, you know, out of good reasons, out of like the whole reason, like we don't want to restrict players and make them toxic, the more toxic you actually end up making them, because players are just gonna set their own restrictions because you need some sort of restriction. You can't expect everybody to always want to play with everybody, right?
Exactly. I think it's just I don't think there's an easy way to win.
Toxic or...
Yes, exactly. Right, watch this.
Yeah, I won't hold you up any longer.
Let's watch this. This was the
look your eyeballs.
This is the original. Now I couldn't find this on the Guild Wars 2 channel. It might be there. This is the original Fractal trailer. This is not the 2000, the later one. But this is when they brought Fractals in for the first time. They showed off the hub and everything. And this is not IGN now of anywhere.
And it's a beautiful trailer, isn't it? Like.
I don't know if I've seen
watched
this or if I have. Not many times.
Well, not many people
right?
have. I don't think so. This just shows off the better Fractal trailer, which I'm going to show in a minute, is a lot better. It's very animated, whereas this one, I'm kind of talking over the top because people are going to be hearing it, and because the podcast is audio as well. It just shows the different areas of all the base Fractals that were introduced. I can't remember the names for the life of me, but these...
Colossus.
Yeah, the Colossus, that was like my
iconic.
That was
one of the first big moments, right? It's like when you see that, it's
also
awesome.
like surprisingly early as well, right? I think this was like the Halloween update, like 2 months into the game or something. Like Fractals got added like super early.
You're completely right.
Like that's actually a lot.
Completely right, Laura. It was. I've put it on the doc how many, and I was surprised by this. And Laura, you are dead on because you've got a good memory apparently, because I could not remember that. I thought they came in a lot later, and I was extremely surprised to find out when they came in. I can give you an exact date as well.
2013.
I think it was. Is that right on there? Fractal the Mist release November 15th, 2012.
Wow.
That was a couple of months after release. Like, that's how early they came in. Unless that's the typo, that was on the wiki as well. And the wiki is normally pretty dead on with dates. Or I've written that wrong. I don't know. I'm pretty sure. Like,
Also, just like us talking about how dungeons were sort of like abandoned early, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of wild because then they must have started working on these fractals like literally like super early.
Mhm.
Like I wouldn't even be surprised if they started working on fractals while the game wasn't even released yet. That is
They
wild
must
how
have
early
been,
that is.
because there
And
was
they
a
dropped
lot.
them all at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. It was. Oh, I'd have to go to the wiki. But it was. How many did I say? I actually think I've written it down maybe on this doc here. There's 21 fractals in all. There we go. Since 2012 initial release. No. I didn't write it down. It's on the wiki anyway. There's like seven or eight, something like that. And they all got dropped at the exact same time. Like it was. Oh, there is a release list on the wiki actually. Maybe I will go grab that because I don't want to talk absolute rubbish. But
That's a lot. That's like the whole base game.
I feel
And
like
the amount of
yeah,
Fractals to dungeons.
it was pretty ridiculous, and you can arrange this by date as well.
And if they dropped it there, it must have been developed during before the game came out already. It must have been in development, right? That's
Yeah.
so much. That's such a big system, and I mean, it's like in a way, it's like the entire gear progression kind of aspect of MMOs that they kind of brought into the game with that, right? Was Ascended? Did they bring Ascended gear in at that same time?
I think it was only the trinkets. The armor and the weapons came in a bit later.
Okay.
That's a
I
good
remember
point.
there was like
I
a big
actually-
controversy just about like the trinkets being added. You know, because people were kind of
Powered
scared that it would be like this gear treadmill coming into the game. Like, hey, there's stuff with better stats now, which
Yeah.
didn't happen, right? But
But
I remember that was
in a
big
way,
thing.
But in a way, fractals are their gear treadmill, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's agony resistance is basically Guild Wars 2's form of a gear progression system, right? As other games have it for every content, Guild Wars 2 basically it only matters in fractals, and it doesn't actually matter because of your stats. It's just like kind of a, extra stat that decides whether you can actually do the content or not, right? But in a way, I've always found like that's kind of the appeal. That's like even the kind of the reason fractals existed in the first place, because if that wasn't there and the scaling wasn't there, then they'd basically just be dungeons, right? That's kind of what I think makes them
I think
the
that's
main
what-
factors that distinguish them.
Someone said it in chat. I don't think they did have the original scales 100. It was 50, yeah, something like that.
That was 50.
Yeah. So there was. So if anyone's listening again for the first time, Fractals is the same amount of people you can have for a dungeon, but they're much shorter, like bite-sized kind of. I would say dungeons, instance content, whatever you want to call them, called Fractals, and you could basically play it on. We would play to a certain point where. You wouldn't have to upgrade your gear much with resistance, like agony resistance it's called, which you could put on certain parts of gear, which were ascended items only, which is like the higher tier above exotic. And you would have to have a certain amount so that you wouldn't take extra damage from stuff, etc., etc. So it was basically a gate, which would mean you wouldn't be able to do certain content until you got this, or it would be a lot tougher to do. You can still try, but you'll probably get wrecked. And that's what we're kind of talking about if you're not sure what fractals are or all these different items and stuff. But yeah, they dropped. It's 9 they dropped at the release, according to the wiki as well, which is ridiculous. So what you're all saying in terms of them being produced probably before launch must be true. Otherwise they really went ham. Like they would have gone ham hard, because that was a lot of content at release. Like
When did Living World start up? 2013?
Like sort of, you could technically call Halloween sort of Living Worlds, but I would say the first real Living World was like Lost Shores, and that was like 2 months after, I think.
Yeah.
I think that was like late
South Sun?
2012 as well.
Yeah.
Was that the
Considering
South Sun
like
Cove stuff?
it must have been like, yeah, this must have been worked on beforehand, because to release Fractals and start up the Living World, it's like that's a lot early on.
Question the dungeon thing I said early on even more that may have just been completely wrong then. Because it kind of wouldn't make sense
Layering
to say,
it
they
on.
probably crunched out dungeons at the very end. Oh, but they also did all of Fractals at the very end of that
Yeah,
cycle.
so they'd already
Kind of
planned
didn't fit at
to change the direction, maybe even before the game even came out, or they had dungeons, or the plan was dungeons was an experience as you level up more so, rather than end game, and then end game was the bite-sized kind of content that you can kind of access. And so this is where I would love to get a dev and be like, you know, what was the thought there? Like, what was the reason that you moved for it? Because I don't know if these questions have ever really been asked that much to devs, and if like I could ever get someone on to answer that would be pretty damn sweet. Maybe I'll try and get that interview.
We would like a peek behind the curtain, please.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Just to know, like, not in just like but just to sometimes know why that was the case.
It would be so interesting to get one of these old dungeon devs on a podcast anywhere, because I've never heard their names. I don't know who they are, and I just know they exist. I know that there's.
You can go and watch the old videos.
A small team, and
you can. There's like 4 or 5 people. I remember I'd have to re-look up the names, but when I was doing research for today, it's on their YouTube.
Yeah,
you can go and find it.
I think I've seen a video or something where one like said a few sentences, but you know, like hearing them talk about dungeons, what's different, what makes dungeons in a way different, because you only hear these rumors, right? Like that dungeons have different code that makes them hard to work with, right? And none of that is super confirmed. It's just like kind of
it's true.
What you hear down the grapevine in a way.
It would be nice to know about the decisions sometimes that they think about and why they make them, because I think that would be really good to know. But I think a lot of devs do kind of hide this info sometimes, is because they like, you know, sometimes it's just not even a decision, it's just because we had to make the decision because it was a thing.
They've got their NDAs, they've signed that paper.
I mean, I could kind of see it just be like, hey guys, we missed some sort of progression in the game, add some sort of system that adds progression, because a lot of players want progression in a game, and do it in a way that doesn't devalue the non-progression based philosophies we have in general. I could see just like a broad statement like that coming down, and the devs thinking, okay, well, we add some, because that's basically what fractals are, right? They're like a parallel to dungeons that have a sort of gear progression to them, right? And it is a big, as much as people love the non-progression thing, that's also one of the people that don't play Guild Wars 2, that's one of the things they hate, right? It's like, I don't know what to do in the game. I have no goals. I have no feeling of character progression. And that's something that Fractals kind of add, even though, in my opinion, not necessarily in the best way, but I do believe that's where they, you know...
You can get ascended items from there. Like, it's a good... I feel like Fractals, even though just a good place to start gathering stuff for, you know, getting into raids if you're thinking about it, and just, well, people play it for money, don't they, as well?
And even just in the natural form of the content, you start at level 1 fractals and you progress to tier 2 of the fractal. You start farming mist shards, like, which is something that I've almost forgotten about it until I actually made a new account at some point years ago, and I remembered, holy shit, you have to farm so many, at least at the time, shards of crystallized mist essence just so I can infuse my gear and get enough agony resistance to actually move on, right? That's actually it's quite the process. So in that way, that is actual character progression, right? You raise your fractal level, you raise your agony resistance.
I think you forget about these things when you've been playing the game for so long, how much actually you did have to do, and it wasn't that easy, and it was character progression, because the game's been out for like 8 years, and it's like, wow, we're in the 9th for now, and we actually have been playing this for a long time, and I did a lot to get my character here, and I'm still doing things, you know, with like legendary armor and whatnot as well. That's a good point, actually. Didn't think about that.
I think that is like just really interesting to think about, because I remember one of the big criticisms of the game, like at launch, was just people hitting 80 and then feeling like they had no more place to go to. And like you said, like Fractals is like progression, but I think kind of the genius thing about it is that they had this progression thing for people who wanted to do that, but it was like optional, right? Like the rest of the game, you don't need this agony stuff. Now that I think about it, it makes total sense why they would do fractals at that point in the game.
And you can
so
still
it's tricky to make things optional, though, because if it's optional, you really have to have a drive to want to do it. And I like fractals, but I also agree that sometimes it feels the grind to get to the proper agony resistance and the the gold sink and the time sink can be quite daunting, especially when you're starting at 0 or you're just starting. But
I think it really depends on what you want to do, right? If it's like an end game thing, and if it's like, I think it's okay to have the time, because I think if it was easy to do, then you really like PvE content and instant stuff, then what would you do after, other than raids? It would be very difficult to be like.
Well,
I don't know.
I'm gonna throw out I'm actually gonna throw out World vs. World there, because if you have ascended trinkets being a reward for fractals at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which of course there have been countless new ways to acquire them since then, but at the time, if that was like the sole way to get them, those are like a 5% stat increase, and I think that's actually pretty big. Any other game would consider a 5% stat increase pretty massive, right? So I believe, and again, I may this is not confirmed, I may be talking out of my ass here, right? But I believe the intended end game was World vs. World at the time, right? Like initially when the game came out, that was like what you really wanted your gear for, is a World vs. World Zerg and be competitive in World vs. World. So in a way, Fractals adding a 5% stat boost through better gear really, I would imagine, and I didn't play well,
Oh, at the time, yeah, it was an appealing thing to get extra stats, yeah, because I was hardcore into World v World early first year. It was out, that was the mode I played, and I remember, it was like, we can go and get this extra stat stuff, but I think we were very much like, I don't want to play like PvE to get, stuff for World v World at the time, and being really anal about that. And it was like, okay, well, I guess we'll have to do it. But then I think they didn't take long for them to bring rewards. I can't remember when reward tracks came in. That would be another conversation. But I don't know. I did like it. I did like the addition of having more gear to get, and thank you, Laura, for reminding us that it was the trinkets and stuff, because it definitely was before they brought in weapons and the armor and stuff. I remember that. Yeah.
I feel like an elephant today. I'm just remembering all these details that
we need people
big brain.
We need people with memory. It's good to recall.
I feel like such an idiot because I wasn't actually really playing actively at the time. I played the game for I was very much one of these players that grinded for the first month and then didn't know what to do in the game anymore and quit until eventually Heart of Thorns got announced. So all these times, it's just I don't actually know anything about this myself.
Maybe that's
I only really started Endgame around Hot too, and then I retroactively went back and played everything.
I think that's because they didn't really know what it was. Maybe they didn't have an idea of what Endgame was anyway. Like Fractals was a thing, but it felt maybe quite niche, more hardcore, I suppose, and maybe the general public or the general population, the casual players of Guild Wars 2 weren't really sure what end game was. It was more of at that point, end game before Fractals was probably, dungeons and temple farming for gear. That was probably end game.
Temple farming.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Events were kind of supposed to be the real end game, right? Like these big, final ore events. That takes me back.
I mean, they're not they're the meta events of their time, right? Because when you're in ore, you start to retake the whole zone, and then you go to the dungeon entrance, and that's where it ends, right? I'm pretty sure. And then there were smaller events for each of the temples as well. And they were awesome. I loved those events. They were cool because there was a whole story of you just along with your story, I guess, with you retaking this zone. And I really enjoyed it. It was for a fair while I was doing those events. I remember just farming them for gear so much, different kinds of gear that I needed for World v World, and just having 5 or 6 types of gear for this thing and for dungeons. And kind of glad I got legendary armor now, but it means I'm not carrying 10 sets of armor with me, which is what it's like in every MMO, every MMO my inventory is full, and I know I suck with inventory anyway, but anyway.
But
I think Fractals are good now. I think Fractals starting out now, because you have so many more Fractals to actually experience, it doesn't feel as necessarily like a death grind where you're just doing the same 9 over and over again.
Well,
so I think starting right now, you're probably in a better spot than maybe back when it first released.
I am gonna.
There's more variety.
There is a little bit more variety, but I'm going to give you some stats now, and this might make you sad. When you've
I
just
got my
said that.
tissues.
So between 2013, September 2013, and July 2016, so that's almost 3 years. And this is probably because of raids. There were no Fractals released. There was nothing. Apparently, according to the wiki, there was nothing released. And this could be because of Heart of Thorns development, of course. This could be because, you know, they'd released 9, and that's quite a lot as like a thing to release. If anyone knows how many dungeons there are, I don't know if there's 9. I can't remember every single one. I could probably look, but
It's like 9 or 8. Something
something
like
like that. So there was
Yes.
there you go.
Yes.
And so there was a big gap there, and I think it's because, you know, in terms of raids, they were expecting raids to be that end game maybe content, but then let me just see, Last Fractal was released as well last year, September 15th 2020. That was 7 months ago.
Is it already 7 months ago
It's
again?
7 months
for
ago.
100.
Yes. And
Wow.
and that
Wow.
was so since the inception of Fractals,
Which is fine. That's okay.
Since the inception of Fractals, 12 Fractals have been released. So that is on average like 1.5 or 1 1/3 Fractals a year. Ish.
Well, I think in general, like after the game release itself, right? Like there was like a whole period where they were kind of getting into their groove of how they do regular updates, right? They had Living World Season 1, which was obviously completely different from the later Living World seasons in terms of pacing and how long it sticks around, right? And I feel like even really after, they even only really got into their whole pacing as it kind of prevailed, is like after Heart of Thorns, right? After the iconic Heart of Thorns content route, as I think people referred to it at the time.
Did you
when
say
they started.
iconic?
Well, it's I think a lot of, wouldn't you remember the big Heart of Thorns content route when everybody
It's
was like really into the
infamous.
game? Like you can literally look at charts of the game's revenue, and like it plummets at some point, like 2 patches after Heart of Thorns, and that's because of that, which ironically is like the time where probably the most raids were released, but
That was
no
a great
Living
time for
Worlds.
raids.
Yeah,
but
it was a good time. but-
that's the thing though. The
Yeah.
Guild Wars, the attraction for the casual Guild Wars 2 player wasn't raids, and it still isn't. Raids
yeah,
are not the
and
thing.
they didn't
which
do
are
anything else
actually doing.
either, right?
Yeah.
And then later they kind of got into that groove where it's like Living World episode always has story, always has some portion of open world, so that there's always something for everybody. And then for a while at least, they did like this: every second patch has like a fractal, and maybe every third one has a raid in it, right? And that's kind of like their whole pacing. But they only really got into that groove way past Heart of Thorns, right? So.
And also, like, Fractals just got like massively revamps when Heart of Thorns happens, right? Like when Fractals first came out, it was like you would play 3 Fractals in a row, I think, and there wasn't any break. And then Heart of Thorns happens, and we got like these daily Fractals, which, like, for me, I only got like back into Fractals after that daily kind of made me do it, you know? Like I got kind of bored of Fractals for a while. And I was like, hey, there's a daily. I'm getting gold for
Same.
this.
Oh my gosh, same.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Rockers just reminded me, and I think it's kind of funny because when we talk about the infamous content drought, I think, you know, many other MMOs have that yearly. Like, they definitely have that after the expansion releases. There's definitely that dip. WoW has it awfully at the moment right now. They've got it terribly going down. I know
Right now,
it's
huge
like
drought.
Yeah, exactly, like Final Fantasy, ESO, you know, after because every year they release a chapter, which is which is basically an expansion, but it's just a little bit smaller, and they have these planned releases every quarter. And then when you hit Q3 or 4, just like November, December, it becomes very, very not dead because it's massive, but it becomes a lot quieter.
No, you
and
can
that's
say
when the
dead. It's
drought's coming
okay.
up.
It's dead.
It's definitely not dead. There's so many people playing the game. But like quieter. That's when the fall off is, right? And it's I think it's just a problem with MMOs, to be fair, after expansions. It's always expensive. Everyone just piles in, they buy the game, they play the content, boom.
I mean, people are making the game, so it's not like you want to overwork people, and it's like
Exactly.
you see companies doing really harsh business practices where they overwork individuals and crunch them, and
I don't like that.
does it make it a better product? Probably not. Like, I feel like when people actually enjoy their work and they take their time with it and they really invest
Well, I think
naturally in it.
that's why they didn't
It
want
ends
to
up being
do.
better.
That's why they didn't want to do expansions at the very beginning. Because if you
Yeah.
remember, like back in the day, like ArenaNet said that we're not going to be doing expansions because I think they wanted this constant. They wanted it every 2 weeks that they were going to do these releases. There was every two, and everyone's like, "Whoa, this is awesome." And no one thought in the back of their head, there's no way they're going to be able to do this. Like,
Yeah,
there's
remember
no
when we all
way.
collectively believed that they could do this in 2 weeks?
I mean-
and you're just like, what?
That's
Did you
fine. I mean, they're not going to
complete
do it
all
in
of
2
this,
weeks,
like, last year?
obviously. They've had like
Yeah.
loads of stuff in the back, but like continually doing that would be a lot of work, and that's kind of probably why they went to expansions, and also just because of the general MMORPG community expectations of an MMORPG is that you get an expansion every so often. But
Yeah.
they haven't released that many, and because I think they have this, I don't want to get into that conversation because it's very long-winded and I'm going to start banging on about it, so I'm going to go back to Fractals. But there are decisions made, and as we go through the rest of what we're talking about, which we need to start doing because there's a lot more to talk about, it becomes very interesting in trying to understand about their decision making. But here is what I think is the awesome Fractal trailer. I don't know if anyone else thinks this.
Sunqua Peak? Oh.
No, it's the general one. This was the one that I actually thought was a lot better.
Oh, this is the one with like all
jumping
the art and the animated
Yeah.
art and stuff, right? Oh,
Yeah,
this
that's
one.
Yeah.
I used to show this to my friends to convince them to play Guilders 2 with me. This was like my favorite trailer at the time.
It's very
saw the
unique.
trailer
It's not,
I saw this so late, like way after Heart of Thorns. It's the first time I even saw this trailer, and I was like, "Wow, this has been in the game." Like,
well, this came in when you were on your break, probably, because this was 2013.
probably, yeah, exactly. I must have missed it, but when I saw it, I was like, "Wow, beautiful."
It's got the good. It's not the introduction of Fractal, like the comparison of trailers. Like I like the original trailer for just atmosphere, but this is more hype. Like this gives you more of like a whoa, Fractals, and it gives you a piece of each story, similar to what the other one did, where it showed you the different things, but it shows those iconic moments, you know, when throwing that person into the lava, which seemed really dark, actually. Yeah, exactly.
It's like cinematic versus gameplay trailer in a little bit, right? One shows you more scenarios in the game, the other one is like nice and stylized and more about the atmosphere.
I think this was definitely very well done, and it was. I feel like this should have been the trailer that they showed. If you are listening to this and you're wondering what it is, come watch the VOD, or you can just Google like GW2 Fractal trailer, and you'll be able to find it, and you'll know what we're talking about. But and I appreciate the subs, by the way, in the chat. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. But yeah,
I think this is still one of my favorite trailers to this day. Like, looking at this again right now, like this keeps up with any later trailer I can think of.
Oh yeah, this
Easily.
is still relevant.
Oh, yeah.
Like absolutely. Just because of how stylized it is, and I think they do when they do a trailer like this, it hits the spot. I like it. It's good times. It's like the Heartthorn stuff as well. I think that was very good.
Yeah, true.
I really liked Heart of Thorns trailers.
Okay, let's pop that
It's a good era.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm gonna have a look at the doc and see where we are. Okay, so that was some information. Do you prefer Fractals over Dungeons? Anyone?
Oh, this is a big one.
Uh-oh. No, we don't have to talk about it for that long, but do you just like, do you prefer
Where do I start?
No, we're not gonna. Oh God, we're never gonna.
Well,
we've been
if
going
you're
for an hour and a half
asking the
already.
question,
We have to go all the way back to 2012.
No. Simple question. Do you prefer? You can
well,
you can build it
thankfully, I
vertically.
have a binder for this particular
Oh,
situation.
God.
So let's see here.
I should have just done dungeons, shouldn't I? Oh. I always have this problem. But so I'm going to go around. Lara, do you prefer fractals or do you prefer dungeons, or is it that you have a specific mood for each one? Maybe.
I prefer fractals because the thing I like about fractals is how they scale. So I like how when you're new, you can get into tier 1s and like how you can go all the way up to the challenge modes. I like how there's sort of that difficulty curve that's there. The one thing I don't like about fractals, just to balance this out a bit, I really like that dungeons feel like they're immersive. You know, they're like a part of this world, right? It's like, hey, this is the Ascalon catacombs in Ascalon. And as a big lore nerd, I love that stuff. That's kind of the sad thing about fractals. It doesn't feel to me as grounded as dungeons. It feels more like I'm going into some game. But just content gameplay wise, I much prefer fractals.
If you think about the LFG topic we had before, doesn't Fractals just off the get-go, by the matter of the format, just immediately destroy every thought you can have of gathering people in front of the, like you have in dungeons? Because isn't that the whole immersive factor you talked about earlier in dungeons? Is, meeting in front of the entrance in the world where the setting of the environment, leads you there story-wise. Whereas in Fractals, you're standing in front of a portal. And in a lobby, literally in a lobby, right? Like you would if you make a lobby for a game in, I don't know, Dead by Daylight or something like that, right? So it's like immediately right there, you're breaking that kind of immersion that you had in dungeons or would have in dungeons.
Exactly.
I think that's maybe why I prefer dungeons a bit more. I think in terms of gameplay and content, fractals they're not super, super short, because they can still take some time, especially if you're in a group and it's just a bit challenging. Depending on the fractal, it can vary. But ultimately, they do feel much shorter than a dungeon. But to me, I think I value a little bit more of that connectedness. And I think because fractals are kind of like, they feel, it's weird, almost like they are such an integral part of the end game, yet they still feel so disconnected from the entire game of Guild Wars 2.
Yeah.
Maybe partially because of the development and that they're not always updated, considering that they aren't the longest form of content. We could see more of them, and I think that might draw me more towards it. But the way fractals have gone, I would prefer to see dungeons more so than fractals. Maybe dungeons a bit short though. Like they don't have to go like 4 different paths. They could literally just make like a 1-path dungeon and add some rewards to it.
I want both. Both. Just do both. Just
both.
Stop.
Why not both?
Rocco, what do you think?
I'm actually gonna go on I think a bit of a tangent here, if that's okay. But I just feel like you'd like, I wouldn't be able to like kind of do the topic justice in a way, because I think both are in a way great, and both I have my problems with. And especially fractals have changed a lot since like where I most enjoyed them. They added a lot of things. They added like the Mistlock modes and stuff. They added the tonic stuff, the major stat increases, stuff like Fractal Guard, stuff like randomized instabilities. A lot of these things not working out the way that I would have wanted them, and in a way kind of. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that, like, to me personally, a lot of these things kind of ruined fractals, to the point where I'd now say, in a way, nostalgically, I think that dungeons are I don't know, I probably prefer dungeons a bit more, but at the height, like at kind of the pinnacle of my enjoyment, I definitely enjoyed fractals more. And what I want to kind of talk about is that I think dungeons and fractals in Guild Wars 2, talking about like the broader scale of the MMO genre, right? They're kind of special because in most MMOs, dungeons are very linear. They're very much, you have to pull that next group of mobs. You tank them somewhere, and you kind of like, in like a very strategic manner, you work your way through. And I think like Guild Wars 2 is very special in that aspect, that you have a lot more fluidity and the content and the combat, right? Like if you remember an old school dungeon tour, right, with like a decent group, you'd have like these very fast paced stealth stacks, rush through a group of mobs, have a Mesmer portal open up, port you behind that wall, have a thief run ahead, you know. And I think that like was very high paced and was very engaging, and that's something that I don't see in other MMOs at all ever. In Final Fantasy, definitely not, right? Like if you compare Final Fantasy dungeon, which is literally follow this one path, kill these mobs, and kill that boss at the end. If I compare that to Guild Wars 2, I just, even though dungeons are some of the oldest content in Guild Wars 2, I think it's one of the most almost revolutionary in terms of gameplay in MMOs as a whole, right?
Yeah.
And that's what to me makes dungeons in Guild Wars 2 just inherently special, right? That's why I will always like kind of say dungeons in Guild Wars 2 are special content. And Fractals initially did a lot of that similarly. You could do a lot of that the same way. A lot of the things I enjoyed about dungeons translated into Fractals, like the whole skipping ahead stuff, like, you know, it's like, yeah, if you guys maybe remember the Aether Blade Fractal, the Aether, the Pirate Fractal, and there's like this part in the beginning where you have like the scaffolding that you have to climb up, and there's like booby traps on the way and stuff. And if you had a good chrono, that chrono could, you know, quickly blink up there, and if you had a really, really good chrono, he'd even place maybe a portal, and people would like that part would be that otherwise to the average group would take, you know, maybe 5 to 10 minutes would be done in a matter of seconds. And that's something I really enjoyed. That really made that chrono stand out, and that was like something to work towards as a player who is maybe more, you know, skill driven. And I found that very special, and a lot of that got removed with the introduction of checkpoints, with the introduction of the respawn nodes and stuff in Fractals, and a lot of that just kind of some stuff that I really enjoy about dungeons that translated into Fractals later in a way a little bit got culled down a little bit in Fractals. And I think that's kind of unfortunate. I think that's something I don't like about them, which kind of led to Fractals now being something I don't enjoy as much anymore.
That's fair.
But yeah, sorry, I wanted to...
No. You made some really important points.
You got it off your chest.
For sure.
Yeah.
Get it.
It's been weighing on me, Crew. Finally, I can talk about this somewhere.
Well, that's
don't have to vent it on Twitter.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You know, things do change, and there's reason they bring these things in, and I'm sure many people share the same views as well. I didn't do Fractals that much back in the day, so like I can't remember the changes and stuff. Sometimes I dip in there, but it's not really the thing that I choose to do in Guild Wars 2 specifically that much. But it doesn't mean that it's not a good experience for some people. A lot of people talking about the difference in quality. Obviously, the dungeons are very old now, peeps, as well. So sometimes comparing like the quality of like graphics and, you know, mechanics and all that kind of stuff is very difficult to compare, because you're comparing like much newer content to older content. But I still think the paths that you're talking about, the originality of like the dungeons, is a very good point. The paths is one thing that I thought was very, very unique as well, because you can do that in other MMOs now. Like there are other paths you can go, but to have that story fit each path and the different bosses and the uniqueness of each path is important. But I'm gonna nip to the bathroom very quickly, and while I do that, just tell me like your favorite Fractal and why, and not too long, and I will be back in like a moment. But like don't.
Oh.
Yeah, tell me your favorite
Take
Fractal.
Take your time.
Oh god, here we go.
It's okay.
I am gonna turn my mic off. Don't worry. I will be right back. And so who's gonna go first? Kroof is gonna go first. I'll be right back.
Damn, I always called on, but I don't mind it.
When he comes back, you're still talking about this.
Yeah, really. Only start talking about it when he comes back. I mean, for my favorite Fractal, I have to say that I've really enjoyed Sunqua Peak, mostly because it's like the newest one. It's feeding the hunger that we all have. It's filling the gaps. It's filling my mind. It's filling my spirit. It's giving me a religious experience that I didn't know I needed, but I definitely would like to feel again. End of Dragons, Cantha. I'll have a taste. So yeah, I'd say Sunqua Peak is my favorite. My least favorite, screw all others. Honestly, dumpster fire. No, just kidding.
Okay, burn them all down.
Oh my god.
Every Fractal.
I don't know if I have a least favorite. I don't know. Do I? The Ascalon one. I'm not a huge fan of the Ascalon one, where you turn into a char.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
That with Thermanova Reactor, those two maybe. I don't know. I don't
Really?
hate anything, but
It's because you want to look at your character, but you get like transformed into
Yeah.
something ugly. That's
I
why
have
don't
to
like
go
them.
around walking hunched over. I already do that in my life. I don't want to do that. Okay, give me a back brace.
I like Sunqua too. Sunqua is also my favorite. I don't like it that much on normal mode because there's like all these other bosses you have to do and it's a bit long. But the challenge mode on Sunqua is like amazing. Like the fact that there's like 2 phases and I don't know, I like the mechanics. It feels like a proper raid fight with like 5 people. I like it. Sunqua is my favorite. Least favorite is probably the underwater one, just because I don't like underwater combat. What about you, Rocker? Real quick.
No, go ahead.
You
Talk
didn't have
more,
to
talk
do it
more.
while I was
I'm
going
still
to the
making up-
bathroom.
I'm still
So my
making up my
appendix.
mind.
Carry on. Whatever you were saying is fine. I don't know. what
Underwater
happened.
isn't fun. That's what I just said.
So that one
And
is.
Sunqua Peak is amazing.
Yeah.
What do you think, Rocker? I was legitimately done.
Okay. Well, I'm a bit conflicted because in a way, like my favorite fight in Fractals is probably Mama, and I think Mama just
Ooh.
was a huge step. I love it totally, and I love 99 in general. But after I just went on that whole tangent about, how like one of the best things about dungeons and Fractals and Goals 2 is the whole skipping mobs part, right? Is 99 really doesn't really fit that, right? So like it's one of the first dungeons they did where they really kind of went away from that format and into more of a boss fight centered one for the CMs, which I love, absolutely love. But in a way, I really appreciate all of the Fractals that have some sort of mob skipping and running ahead, stealthing, that kind of gameplay. I just like that a lot. And so in a way, I guess 99 CM favorite, maybe together with something like, I don't know, Aether Blades or something that has that a lot. Least favorite, probably Twilight Arbor. Is it? No, it's not Twilight Arbor, Twilight Oasis.
Dungeon.
Really?
Oh, Twilight Oasis.
The one
Yeah.
with Amala at the
Yoko.
end?
Mhm.
Yeah, hate it.
I mean, that one has a lot of skips, though. I would have thought you would have liked that.
But I hate it so much. It's awful.
Even though it's got
It's
skips, he still
awful,
doesn't like
yeah.
it.
For some reason, that's the
Yeah.
one. Oh no, that's
That wasn't the
no, that's
question.
not
It wasn't the one you hate the
Oh,
most.
God.
We're finishing that conversation. We're moving on.
Wait, but
Um,
everybody else said it. Everybody else was like,
Oh,
what's
they
the one
said
you
they
like
have
the
the
least?
one they
Wasn't the question
dislike.
your favorite and least favorite?
Oh, okay. No, it wasn't. But okay, that was.
Oh, I made that up.
You
Okay,
don't
I'm
like-
a trendsetter.
You did make it
It's
up.
my podcast now, people.
Wow, Crew, if you trapped me into being negative about the game, even though I hate being negative about the game.
And I did not say anything
We can-
negative. It was
I don't-
only you. How dare you
You're,
gaslight
can
me?
be
you're setting me
critical.
up so that when Jepro comes back, he's gonna be like, "Oh, dude,
Oh.
Rocco's ranting again, man."
It's definitely not like people could rant and like be critical of the game. That's definitely what we just do it in a different way to other podcasts because I definitely do it. But it's in a way where it's just like there's this thing where I don't like it, and that's okay because we can all have things we don't like
Yeah.
about stuff. That is okay. There is nothing wrong with that. Okay, I am going to move this on now. I'm not going to tell you which one I like the best and which one I don't like that much because Fractals isn't something that
You've got to tell us which one you like the most, at least. Like, come
How
on.
is this democratic?
I think I like the one with the
Colossus.
Colossus. The Colossus dude. I can't remember what it's
Okay,
called.
there you go.
Right.
The reason is
That's a good
because
one.
every single time I get to the end, I'm just like, I get emotional. He just walks away and he's happy and you've set him
Oh,
free and
yeah.
it's nice, And when you get that little achievement the first time, what is it? You wave or kneel? I can't remember. It's just like
Yeah,
It's like Bowsem or something, yeah.
Yeah.
bow, and then he like
That's
turns
it.
around and he goes like this as well, right? Yeah.
Like I thought that was very epic. It was just like that was a
Absolutely.
very unique experience that I've not had in Guild Wars 2, like had until that point, and it was very cool. This big being, and it was just,
And it's also
yeah,
like it's this big mystery, right? It's like I don't think that's been explained ever, has it?
Unexplored
Is there
much.
like lore about like what that Colossus actually is?
No.
It would
and I
be
love
cool.
that.
No.
It'd be cool if they brought
I
it back.
actually
And the
really love that.
dragons.
Yeah, well, who
End
knows?
of
Maybe we-
Dragons is just
we
the
find them in
beginning of
Canada.
big human people.
Yeah, they're like, we're
God.
jumping from dragons to giants. Come along.
I mean, the thing is the Fractals are supposed to be their own independent kind of story, right? They're Fractals. It's it's in the name, you know, a fraction, a fractal is like a shard, like a piece of something separate. Like it always feels very, there is some links obviously to the present world, but like, you know, it feels very separate at times. Fractals, it feels like, I think Laura said it before, it feels like you're walking into another game.
I'm just gonna quickly say that I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's actually this is actually a Tolkien quote. If Tolkien once said about Tom Bombadil that he likes to keep the character unexplained and not really fitting the rest of his narrative as much because it's like a genuine mystery. It's like a world needs some unexplained stuff, right? Something
That's
that
true.
just you like that you keep wondering about when you go back to it, right? And that you can't 100% explain. And that's actually, I think that's actually kind of a strong thing in a way.
I kind of like that.
Something that we can make like 40 minutes speculation videos about, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. If anyone wants concert, Criff is like,
There we go.
I want to see it, Criff. Do it.
Oh, me? Okay.
The speculation video, for sure.
Anything you
I
ask.
don't see that in the next week. If I don't see that in the next week, I'm going to be very upset. So I'm going to show you. We're going to go on to raids now, very quick. It's going to be a bit easier to cover, actually.
You always say quick, and then it's like an hour later.
I'm sorry. If anyone does need to go or need to go to the bathroom or something, that's absolutely fine.
No. I just
I'm
love
leaving.
it. It's so consistent.
See ya.
This is the raid trailer.
I'm done.
Bye.
Raids not my thing. I'm out. Thanks for the dungeon talk.
Here we go.
Like, oh, I gotta go now.
This was around, obviously, Heartthorns was, this was one of the things that came with Heartthorns, even though it came a little bit later, a month or so, I think it was a month or so. I've got the date and everything. We're actually we just killed Gorsable as a community, in our guild for this past week. I love Gorsable.
Congrats.
Did he lick you
Yeah,
too?
thank you. It did all the things to us. It was.
And I was special.
The thing is, no one's special.
And we all get brought down 5 bars.
Pretty much.
Tentacle theme box, you say?
Yes,
Sorry.
yeah, people made many different
Yeah, I bet.
comments when we started playing this boss, because not many people see people trying to make progression on those bosses.
Oh, I bet, yeah. Especially Gorzable is probably...
Yeah, because like people
pretty
have,
tough. Yeah.
like we have our own. So I'll give you a little bit of context for this, and people listening at home. We basically have said you can play whatever you want, pretty much. You know, bring some food, do the things like do you know the minimal amount of stuff. Like bring some food, maybe get some food of someone else, whatever, and you know we'll learn the fights together. So people who have never raided before, I just wanted to be like, can we get through some of the fights and some of the stuff if you just walk into a raid without like specifically planning for it. And see what happens. But as we've kind of gone on, like people have taken up roles where they're like, oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this mechanic specifically, and we've started to evolve, and still people are playing builds they like and enjoy the stuff they're most comfortable with, and that's also fine. And it's been a really awesome experience to just, because I've actually learned the fights how they were intended, and specific stuff where I was a DPS maybe before a healer and my role was very easy and I didn't really know what the hell was going on. I just got carried essentially, although I was doing my role fine, which is, you know, an important part, but I didn't really know what was going on sometimes, or I knew that I needed to go here and do this, but I didn't know what someone else was doing. And at the moment I'm playing a lot of different roles in the raids themselves, and I've actually really enjoyed it. But raids are definitely an interesting one. Let me give you some information. So Heartthorns released 23rd of October. Raids launched November 17th, which is after the Heartthorns release on October 23rd. So it's just under a month. And there was 4 wings that were released between the initial release and February 2017, before Path of Fire came out. So that's not too bad in terms of other games maybe releasing raids as well. I'm thinking about Elder Scrolls Online, not sure about comparison to Final Fantasy. I know they've got a shed load of raids. Then there was a bit of a wait. It was, not until November after Path of Fire where they started to release the other wings, the three further wings, and it's been almost 2 years since we've had a new raid wing as well. But saying that, I think we know generally that there hasn't been a focus on raids, and they've kind of told us in roundabout ways that that's not something they're focused on at the moment. We don't know with the new expansion, of course, but we've at least
I'm going to credit them there that they may not have released raids, but they did release strike missions, and they did work on other instance PvE formats, right? Even though, whether you love them or not is up to everybody themselves, right? But they did do strike missions, they did do Dragon Response missions. Almost instead of raids, right? It's and strike missions definitely have their similarities to raids, right? So
I think you can categorically say as well, the more people are playing strikes, I think you could probably say that more people are able to access strike, and we'll talk about that when we get to strikes, but or maybe we can cross over the conversation as well. But considering the fact that Arena said they would never do raids, how because they did, they definitely did. I'm pretty sure they said they wouldn't. Maybe they said that we haven't got raids on the horizon or something. Maybe they didn't say specifically, but that's the message I got early on. How surprised was everyone that they actually brought raids into Guild Wars 2? Or were you all surprised, or was it like, they'll probably do it in the end? And I was.
As soon as they hired a raid team designer, it's kind of just like, oh, okay, I guess they're doing raids. Because I remember it was also like, it was before Heart of Thorns released.
Yeah.
And before them even announcing it, really, that I feel like the community was generally in agreement that raids weren't going to really be a thing, even though people like to float the idea and stuff. But as soon as they saw hiring on their website of raid designer, or looking for someone who has experience in raids, either it was a direct job offer or some roundabout way of saying that they were starting to look into raids and larger content. So by then I was like, it was a nice surprise, because it's like, oh, this is going to happen. But of course we never got confirmation until they officially announced it. And I think it was the perfect place to announce it, with an expansion, a new feature, something new to grab people. And I've been happy with them pretty much ever since, other than the cadence and the release schedule. But that deals with timing and scheduling.
You're saying it, that's exactly what I am, right? I started playing the game again after the Heart of Thorns announcement because of raids, and I had never raided before in any other game, but I wanted to try it out, and that was actually, to me, when I watched that was the feature that made me think, okay, I should give it a go again. Maybe I'll, a few months before it launches, I'll get into the game.
Was Guild Wars 2 your first MMO then? MMORPG?
No, just the MMOs I played never had. I never played WoW. My first MMO was called Conquer Online, and then I played a lot of Silk Road Online, and they're very different.
Wizard 101. Okay, never mind.
What?
I heard someone talk about that recently. I don't know.
Silk Road or Conquer? Which
No,
one?
the wizard one. Oh my god.
Wizard 101.
Oh.
I have no idea what that is. What is it? What?
But
Sorry.
It was raids that got me into. It was the announcement of raids that got me interested in the game again, and then I got interested for other reasons, because I found a community. I started doing dungeons, started doing daily world boss tours, etc. Eventually, I was just as excited about the guild hall as I was about raids, and then that was a bit of a disappointment, and then I got all about raids.
Yeah.
In a way, if the game had panned out differently, maybe my whole content would have become finding decorations for guild halls. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, don't worry. I think that's kind of the power of raids in a way, because I never really quit playing. I've been playing since launch, but I was definitely a casual player. So, I would do some dungeons, but I wasn't really trying to speedrun anything. I would just kind of chill, just play casual. But then when I first got into raids, that's what made me want to try to get better. That's what made me want to get better gear and learn my rotation and all that stuff. For me, raids were definitely like the catalyst that made me more interested in like taking the game more seriously in a way.
I'm just setting myself in the chat. Don't worry.
in there.
What is
If
that?
you do want to
Support
play
chat,
Guild
bro?
Wars 2 for free right now, or you want to purchase either of the expansions, the link is in the chat right now. Go click it to support your favorite creator.
Amazing.
Also, these guys
What
have
an amazing
a link
way
as well.
to support a content
It is.
creator.
It is an amazing way to support your creators of it. And also, I'm pretty sure.
What is that, Mark? Twitch Prime?
There you go.
Twitch
Mark.
Prime? That's...
See, there you go as well. That's right.
PayPal. What?
I now accept Dogecoin and all the other ones. I don't care about that. I don't understand it. So,
Pay me in food and I will be happy.
Laura, were you surprised?
The raids got announced. Not really. I didn't think it was gonna be called raids. I think like, you know, like how fractals were like this new thing. I
Yeah.
thought the arenas would come up with something that was a bit like raids, but it would be called differently and there would be some twists. I was surprised that they were called raids.
Yeah, like
So-
strike
Yeah.
missions, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. That's interesting as well. Yeah, that's actually kind of surprising they didn't put their own spin on it. I guess they kind of did, because in a way, I think like with Guild Wars 2, they definitely wanted to get rid of the idea of mobs in between fights, even though technically they do have one after Veil Guardian, but I see that as they did do it very differently. Because you could still get like, you know, some of the shards and bits and bobs from completing their next event, which, you know, when you've got to capture you've got to do the capture points in front of the gate and then to advance through, and then you've got the run towards the next boss, right? When you got this wave kind of following, I can't remember what that's called.
Yeah, all these pre-events and raids, right?
Yeah, so they did it in a more of a Guild Wars 2 way, where it feels more rewarding to go and complete that stuff. Like you had to, it's almost like a mini, you know, not DPS check really, but in a way it is, I guess. But yeah, I think the way they introduced it, I really liked Veil Guardian. I still do. I still like it. I don't know why. I think it's because I've just got the best memories from it. Like, remember killing my first Guild Wars 2 boss, and I remember I did it with a few like content creators, and we did it on stream. Mighty Teapot was in there, and I think that's the first time he ever killed a boss as well. I'm pretty sure. But there was Mighty Teapot, there was Zap, there was loads, and we had like a Guardian tank, and we just did it. It was one of those experiences, you know, when you do something for the first time, and it's not meta, you don't know what it is, and it's so rewarding. You're just like, whoa, we did this and I don't know how. Like, we didn't have like maximum might or anything. We just knew we had to have people doing different roles, and it was just so good. And learning this thing from the beginning. And I think that's why I'm really enjoying raids right now, because that experience is being replicated with, you know, a new group of friends and like a community where, you know, these people don't know a lot of what's going on, and we're talking about it and actually playing the mechanics and not avoiding stuff. And it's been so cool. I think I was very surprised that they introduced raids, and I was in a place where I was like, I'm not sure I want raids. Actually, I was one of the reasons why
Blasphemy.
I was still excited for it, because I remember being like, oh, this is a cool new thing, but I wasn't like, whoa, awesome. I was just like, oh, they're not doing their own thing. Like Lara said, I think I was a bit surprised they're not calling it something else or putting their own twist on it. But when I got in there, I loved it. Like, I was enjoying it. But
I actually think it's probably a downside to some marketing for Guild Wars 2 that they tend to create these like specialized names. I don't think it's as necessarily like recognizable. So I think for raids, it was probably smart to keep it as raids, just for marketing of their first expansion.
That's very
I
true.
think if
Definitely
they
a large portion of
called it
MMO
something
players
else.
down there
Yeah, the
that
language.
are drawn in by the name raids, but just the word raids will draw viewership on Twitch. It will make launches just. If you compare like the launch of an episode that had a raid attached to it on just like Twitch compared to one that doesn't, like you'll find much higher viewership, just because like other game, like there's like a whole MMO spanning community of people that are into raids that will give that a look over that basically.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's actually a very good point. Yeah, you need to market in that way, right, where people understand what it is. And I guess once they've introduced raids, then they know that raids are in the game, but like strikes are the evolution to the We'll talk about that
Evolution?
in a moment. Anyway, evolution, revolution. Yeah, one of the words.
What's the opposite of that again? No, but
Devolution.
which is funny because strikes are actually a great format, right? And other games have them as well. If
They're
you look
cool.
at Final Fantasy, they have the exact same format, and it's very successful. It works very, very well. They do it better than Guild Wars 2 as well, admittedly, but it's a format that I am actually a big fan of, and that I think does really, really well. It's fairly easy to develop single boss fights that don't require the same amount of work as a full raid would.
Yeah.
And, they don't invite that whole exploration, especially in Guild Wars 2, right? Like the whole big instance where you can, have little notes hidden and all that stuff, right? Like just the individual boss fight in its own secluded arena. It's a format I'm a fan of. Sadly, didn't go anywhere.
Well, before we go to strikes, does anyone have a favorite wing? Like, so if you are listening for the first time as well, raids in Guild Wars 2, even though they didn't specifically state like when it released there would be this trinity and everything else, it kind of is. Raids brought it more into PvE line, I guess, and well, not in all the fights because it's not necessarily there's a tank for every fight, but I would say there is definitely someone healing and there is support in different ways, like boons, dispersal, and stuff like that, and people bring things to the fight which help your team, obviously. To do the things, but it's still, it's 10-person content and it's a raid, and so essentially these roles are kind of, they've kind of come. They were in the other modes. The Trinity existed in PvP, existed in World v World as well to a degree. You've got your tanky players, you've got your supportive players, you've got your damage players. It's a Trinity. And the raids brought that in Fractals. People do play with a healer, they do like bring like a firebrand or a tempest sometimes if they want to. And I think I was going to ask what everyone's favorite wing would be. Actually, I just wanted to give a little bit of information to people who don't know anything about raids. But the problem with raids now, I think, is and why they haven't continued them, which I think we all know is access is a big issue. Also maybe access in loads of ways, like being able to get in there. Maybe gear is a bit of an issue for a lot of people. Guild Wars 2 is a very different kind of game, MMORPG compared to others, and I think there's casual players in every game, but I think in Guild Wars 2 raids didn't appeal to everyone, and that's okay and that's fine, because you can play Guild Wars 2 as hardcore as you like, but you've got to know people to do it because of access to things isn't as easy as maybe other games. And I don't know if anyone can actually, if they want to disagree with me, they can. It's just my opinion. But have we all played raid? I've raided with crew, so I know, and I'm pretty sure Rocker does. Laura, you've done raids, haven't you? I've seen you do raids, I think.
Yeah,
a lot.
Raids are kind of what sort of started my content creator thingy in a way, because I started making these raid videos.
Which is funny because it's what ended mine.
Oh no! Wait, what?
No. When Supreme dies, another rises.
Well, this is why it's good to have people on the show with different things that feels like for one person it's awesome, for one person it's not. So Laura, why did it like start your what was it that got you really excited to do that kind of stuff?
Well, the thing is, as I was saying, I was always kind of a casual player, right?
Yeah.
I was actually really into playing music in Guild Wars 2. So I would just like sit in Divinity's Reach and just play music the whole day. That's like 90% of what I did. And then one day, me and some friends were like bored.
You would really like Lord of the Rings Online.
I have a harmonica.
Hell yeah. I'm proud.
Sorry, I
No,
didn't.
but like one day, me and some friends, we were being like bored, and it was like 3 of us, and we were like, we have never raided. Let's just go into a raid and let's just see how we do with 3 people, because we were all of us were kind of scared of raids, right? It's like this difficult content, it's difficult to get into, especially if you don't have any of the kill proof. You have to find like a training guild. It's this whole thing. And then we just had fun with like 3 people. We were like doing care and everything for, and we started adding like more of our friends, being like, hey, you want to join us? You want to join us as well?
Yeah.
So we ended up getting 10 people, and I was like recording this, and I thought it was really fun. I thought there was a lot of funny moments and stuff. So I turned that into a video that was called "A Music Guild Tries to Raid." Posted to Reddit, and it actually got like a lot of views. And I started making more of those and more of those. Yeah, and that's kind of where I started off. And now I really like raids, and I do them all the time. Raids are fun.
Wonderful.
Okay. Well, no, that's awesome.
So my
Sorry,
very
keep
bad
going.
Origin story.
The origin story of Lara.
That is the origin story right there. I don't have to make one up. I have to do that sometimes for viewers. It's interesting.
Oh, I do that every day in life.
Just like different ones all the time.
I'm not even surprised. I'm just not
Because you can
surprised.
just meet new people and then you can just say whatever. They have no reference.
They have no reference. Rocker, why was it the race didn't appeal to? I don't know. What was it that kind of, without going too...
Yeah, I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna go there. I was just being cynical. I was just being cynical because I eventually kind of went down that whole rabbit hole of expecting more than is feasible, and
that's fair enough.
And also just like inherently liking the content too much to the point where if you are left without it for a year or so, you start getting really annoyed with everything else.
You get some withdrawals.
Kind of. You just become overall a little bit negative, and I think that's kind of affected me a lot in Guild Wars 2 and kind of made the game less fun to me on a lot of levels, right? But I mean, in a way, really, I think raids are like some of the best content that's ever come out in the game. I would actually go as far as to say that raids have advanced all of PvE in every aspect more than any other content has. Because when you're saying, like, you remember the times back in the day when you were progging your raid for the first time, what you were progging wasn't just the raid, you were progging the game, right? Like, because you were, for the first time, finding out about things like Condi builds, right? We're talking about how Trinity has never been in the game, but it's never been in the game in the worst of ways before raids were introduced, because everybody just played the one Berserker build, and you just placed an ice bow and pressed 4, and that was, oh yeah, we don't have Trinity, we're so cool, right? Like,
engaging dynamic combat.
it was terrible. If people think about like if people now think that you're fenced into a meta, try playing dungeons in 2014 or something, and try to like enter on a necro or a ranger or something, right? Let's see how well you will fare. And then raids came out, and they started to massively improving all of PvE, all of combat, everything about it, right? They brought out break bars, they made CC a whole thing, right? They brought out like suddenly quickness became a thing, right? That wasn't a thing before. Like, you didn't have quickness for longer than 10 seconds before. In a dungeon fight, a Mesmer would place a time warp and that's it, right? And in raids, you suddenly like you had the Chronomancer that had just come out, and you started experimenting with like having a class that actually focuses on this boon. And Alacrity just came out, right? So like there were all these huge improvements and innovations to the combat and PvE in Guild Wars 2, and that they were all tied to raids. And without raids, they would have never, we saw a few little experiments in Triple Trouble with Condi builds, right? But that was really it, right?
Build diversity you're talking about, right? Build diversity, like actual content, that's important,
The first big thing that my group struggled with when we tried to get into raids was we needed to find somebody who could play Condi.
Yeah, I was literally thinking that.
Did anybody else do the migraine achievement because it was the only way to acquire a Condi amulet back in the day? Or like,
yes, right? I did.
Things like this. That was all brought in because of raids, right? That wouldn't have. And in a way, because of that, I think raids aren't really just raids. Raids are like a revolution to PvE and Guild Wars 2 in general, because they revolutionized the combat, they revolutionized the builds and everything. And look where we are now. You could go on, like, every single class in Guild Wars 2 has at least 3 builds that I can think of that are absolutely good and comparable and competitive that I could just think of right off my head. And to each of these builds, you could add your own little twist that you enjoy. And that is some of the most variety build craft that there's no MMO that I think can compete with this, even remotely. So none of this would have happened without raids, right? Like, this wouldn't have happened if it had stayed dungeons. This wouldn't have happened if it would have stayed open world. Raids unlocked an entire dimension to Guild Wars 2 that hadn't been there before. And that's why, that's why I'm such a big fan of them. That's why I'm so sad that they're not getting developed. And
I think that's the thing, isn't it? I do feel like they're definitely, I feel like ArenaNet have been on a journey with Guild Wars 2 ever since, even with just releasing, because
Ever since it
just,
launched.
Yeah, I mean, I'm legitimately, it's so different from Guild Wars, like their original game, instance content is the thing they did. That's all, the only open world areas were the hubs, right? And some other bits and bobs. And I'm not like a seasoned Guild Wars player, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But like, I do feel like they've been learning for a long time, and trying to understand the player has been one of the things they've been trying to do for a long time. They've done that with dungeons, fractals, raids, now strikes, and that's what they've been trying to think of. What is our end game? Is it living story? Is it the big open world meta events? Is it the achievement system, which I actually think is the end game in Guild Wars 2? In all honesty, and raids and now strikes, and I think it's a big combination. It's more of, I think they're always just trying to offer a tons of options, different things that people can do, and the end game is whatever you want it to be, right? But I think that they're still trying to come up with this thing where it is like, the big thing at the end where you can do, and like raids was that attempt maybe at that. And then realizing how many people actually could get involved in it and get access to it and actually play it consistently, was something that dipped off, and maybe they knew about a long time ago, but wanted to kind of almost finish the raids releases from Path of Fire, which is like the third wing, and then kind of be done with it. That's my assumption anyway. And again, that's just an opinion. But yeah, I did really enjoy raids. I think one of the things that I really loved about raiding was the PvE legendary arm that you could get as well, and how they intermixed with that. And obviously, different other things where you can get different skins and loot and different, and like snippets of story as well, which, may have come from Guild Wars, or is just, new story that they brought into the game and continued that on. I think that was really good, especially because I know now, like when we got to Samurog and we're in Wing 4 and we're talking, and some of the story through there, people are like, oh, there's this thing, or oh, there's that. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. Little shoutbacks to the previous game. I'm just like, this is cool, I kind of want to go and play Guild Wars now to understand a lot of what's going on, because I'm clueless. But I don't know, I think there's a lot in Guild Wars 2, and I forget about that. And there you go, look, there's Guild Wars. I've got like a whole collection.
You should get it.
I've got it. Yeah, I've got it. I've got the whole thing. I played it on stream. I've played one of the expansions. I can't remember which one. But we're gonna play one of them before End of Dragons as well. So we're gonna do that.
You should also maybe get Path of Fire as well. Use the links down below.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Here's my look. It was too memorable.
What was that one? What is that? Is that a mini art book?
Oh yeah, does this show up? It's an art book.
Does it show up? Wow. It's on the camera. Oh yeah. I've got that.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, the mini art book.
I have something too. You see this?
Oh, that's deep.
Yeah, that's nice.
Chunky one.
I'm not gonna go and get my collector's edition Ritlock. If you want me to go and get it,
pull out the Ritlock again and just let us bask in its glory.
Right. Who has a toaster, guys? Who has a toaster?
Oh, I do.
No, wait, that is
you
the
have a toaster?
I have a toaster, but it's in England.
Yeah. See ya.
It's in England though, and I've got. Wait for him to put his headphones back on.
I've always wanted a toaster.
I've got a shower as well, mate.
A shower?
Shatterer.
Oh,
you got a shower?
Shower.
Who has a shower?
They have like shower curtains and a shower head. Do they have like a wand or something?
Well, the thing is,
Wow.
I just got my 10-year green card for America, so hype that. But
Congratulations.
also, thank you very much. But now I can get all my stuff sent over. So I can get my shower sent over, I can get my toaster sent over, I can get all that stuff sent over. I'm just gonna have a Guild Wars 2 corner.
Nice.
Okay,
Anyway.
but like, do you eat toast? Do you toast? Do you toast
I
bread?
make grilled cheese sandwiches. I'm just gonna have to make it in a different way now.
Okay,
So
good. Because it would be I'd be crestfallen if someone got a toaster and they don't eat bread. I wouldn't know what to do with myself.
Broke. Like, I don't know. Anyway, this conversation's gone away from us. Again, if any of you do have stuff you need to go and do, it's okay if you need to go, or but if you need a break and you need to go to the bathroom or need to get some water or anything, please do so as well, and I will keep talking. Easy to do.
I just wanted to make a statement about being envious of your toaster, that's all.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen it for 5 years, so...
Doesn't it like toast like the Guild Wars 2
Yes.
logo in?
I never used it.
I know, right?
I'm pretty... Yeah, I did get it. I got it. Who did I get it from?
No,
I think I got it at
not
the
toast.
Festival event. I got it at the Festival event. When we can all meet up again in person, I'm thinking of organising a festival in America.
What?
Tell anyone. If you go and look up what festival is, I'm pretty sure Rocco knows what it is, and Laura might know what it is as well.
A festival?
Festival,
That was the
little
German
events.
community event, right?
Yeah. Well, there was
Wait,
one
you
in
went to a
England and France
festival?
as well. Yeah, no, there's one in
Really?
England and France as well.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah.
There were, yeah. I only know the German one, like for obvious reasons, but like I know that like there was a German community called Guild News that organized it. So
Oh, yeah,
in my
awesome
head, it's
people.
always been like their thing. But
Oh, I think they
you're
started
right.
it.
There was,
Yeah. I think
there
they
were
started.
other countries that did festivals and other communities.
We'll have an
Do you
American
dress
one.
up like a
yeah.
We'll
clown?
do it in Seattle. There you go.
No, like festival is actually a Quaggan thing. Like foo or
Oh,
something
yeah.
is a Quaggan.
Oh.
But you're
Yeah.
actually by law required to dress up as a Quaggan if you go there.
No,
That's-
no, you don't.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Ooh, Quaggan likes this beer.
You have to talk like this too.
Yeah,
Yes,
you can talk
exactly.
like that. We did it in a
Exactly
pub
this.
in England, and we had like a mini PvP tournament on in the actual like pub
Well,
and
do it
stuff.
next
and
year.
it was very cool.
Because then I'll be 21, so I can drink then.
Yeah,
No.
awesome. Yes, go and check it out.
But yeah, fun
And it
memories.
was
Dude.
awesome.
That was awesome.
Oh yeah, they were
Dude.
great. I love those.
I had a griffin race against another content creator on stage. That was
Oh nice.
fun.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
actually quite a good idea.
yeah,
Might-
but they had custom they had like the standard keybinds, and I have very custom keybinds, so I couldn't play it at all. And I was
Oh
I
yeah,
messed
that's
up
that's
horribly.
always my
Like-
thing. If I'm ever gonna go and play a game anywhere else, I always take my mouse with me, and like
Yeah,
I
that was
print
awful.
screen the thing and I take it with to get super keen.
Made a fool of myself. They never let me have that one.
They're just now we know as well. Right, okay, I'm gonna get back on topic. Sorry, that was actually my fault. Okay, favorite wing. Mine was and is. I think my favorite wing is still gonna have to be the original one. Although I have different favorites for different reasons. Yes,
Spirit Veil's cool.
I like the first wing. It's my favorite one. Next, Laura, what's your favorite one?
I like Wing 5 because it's in the underworlds and there's Doom and there's all the like lore
damn
stuff
it.
and the
I might have
just
to change
amazing.
my mind. I like that one as well. Yeah, it's
reason.
between
and
the
also
first
just
one and that one.
loved when it first came out, like there was a bit of a big like world's first race on like Doom.
Yeah.
Most of the world's first race didn't last that long, but the Doom one actually lasted surprisingly long. So I just have a lot of good memories to Wing 5.
Doom was an outlier. Doom was definitely, I think, a lot of raiders have fond memories because of
Yeah.
exactly that. It's like the first raid that didn't get cleared in a matter of hours, in a way, right? Like, where like
Yeah.
being the first to actually clear Doomsium actually meant something, whereas in most others, it was like, okay, is it gonna be? Are they going to clear it at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., right? It's not a matter of when this week, it's a matter of when today. Which is a bit unfortunate, right? But
Yeah,
Maybe.
but I think that's when it started to dip their interest and them thinking about what they were going to do. But anyway, Rocker, what's your favorite one?
I would say Wing 1 as well. Fondest memories, first thing I progged, and I still think till today it's one of the best wings to actually introduce you to raids. It's like, I feel like every boss in Wing 1 has like something it teaches you, you know? It's like this.
Yeah.
It's like this good teacher that doesn't teach you by just telling you something, but by like, you know, leading you through the game and confronting you with different challenges, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what Wing 1 kind of excels. It's the perfect introductionary wing.
Yeah.
I agree.
I would disagree.
I mean,
Really?
this is
Controversy, Brave?
this is all personal opinion stuff. You can't disagree with someone's opinion. I mean, you can obviously, but like this is Rocker's favorite.
Well, Grove, I guess we're done here.
No,
then.
no.
Yeah, Grove is
Not
just,
about-
Grove is just, I don't. It
about
doesn't
the
matter
favorite,
what
but
you
about
like.
the-
It's so bad. You can't like that thing.
No, not about the favorite.
Wow,
about the
Proof
introduction.
is just crushing dreams today. God.
You know what?
How dare you?
For this, it's a
Oh
hobby.
my God, so toxic.
No, not for the favorites,
what
but
I'm
for
here
the
for.
actual introduction of raids. Not only was it the first raid, but I think it's weird because it set the tone that raids were going to be extremely difficult. But I actually kind of think Wing 4 would have maybe, when you look at the difficulty, I think Wing 4 might have been a better starter raid for raiders if they had switched around the Mersat Overseer and Karen,
Deimos,
and
though.
then
That's where
Samarag, then Deimos.
That's
That
where I
probably would have
disagree
been.
because I don't think Wing 4 does that, right? What I said earlier with every boss teaches you something, I don't think Wing 4 does that. Like
I think Wing 4
can-
teaches you a lot. It teaches you
people, I was
dodging. It
asking what your
teaches you
favorite raid
special
was.
action.
Stop it, Jeb, bro. This is not about you anymore.
I was asking what your favorite raid was. You
Hi,
can be
Jeff.
both right because it's your own personal opinion, what you enjoy the most.
Giving the viewers
I mean,
entertainment.
What is
There's
your
many
least
there's
favorite
m-
raid?
Yeah, there we go. You've done that.
No, that's cool, right? I just that's what I meant with that earlier. Right? It's like I think other raids do that as well in terms of like teaching you a certain aspect of raiding, right? That like Can doesn't make your group really split up, right? Can removes
I mean,
one
it definitely
person from
does
the group,
split up
you
the
know?
group. Everyone ends up all over the place.
It teaches you how to zone. It teaches you how to kite. It teaches you how to dodge a raid wide attack.
I think it teaches
There's
you
many
differently
things
for
that-
sure. Yeah,
It teaches you different mechanics, but I think
yeah.
I think it's maybe a little less difficult than Wing 1. And as a starter raid, when looking back at the launch of raids, Spirit Veil was the only one, so we couldn't compare it. But I think it was just maybe a little too difficult, preventing some more population actually getting into it. But I don't think it's the hardest thing. But it maybe like
fair
at the
enough, fair
time.
enough.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I just think like that sometimes it's good to have, even if it's more difficult, right? That's not the
Yeah.
like
I
that
actually-
like difficulty itself. Even if Wing 4 is easier, right? I just don't think it's as educational in a way, right? If that makes sense.
I think the intention.
But I definitely see what
of-
you mean, right? Like, and you're not wrong about it. Absolutely.
The intention of Wing 1 is to be in education, especially the first boss, like learning the different bosses before you even get to the fight itself, like in which one literally takes what kind of damage, and you have to remove a boon, and there's all the mechanics are there. And then they just kind of put it into one, and when you get to the first boss, I kind of like that.
In a funny way, right? Like Veil Guardian forced you to have the group diversity, which was non-existent at the time, right? Like
Yeah.
it forced you to have a Condi build. It forced you to have certain builds that you weren't used to having at the time.
Okay.
So in a way, like the perfect boss to like kind of break into a new era, right? Like of builds and stuff, as we were saying before.
Yeah, no, it's true. That's true. I never thought about it in that way. That's good. But Kroof, Wing 4, you liked it? Was there any boss on there which you were just like, yeah, this is cool, or there's a
I don't know
reason
if
why
Wing
you
4
like
is
it?
my
Or...
favorite wing. But I do love Deimos, and I do like Samarag. I think the last two bosses were pretty stellar in that wing. But I think for nostalgia, I think Spirit Veil is honestly one of my favorites as well. Maybe the ending of Spirit Veil, because it's the third wing. What was it called? When you fight
Stronghold of the Faithful.
Stronghold of the Faithful. Yeah, I have very fond memories of that as well.
I think that's like the story implications that had were really special at the time. I remember clearing Wing
Yeah.
2 and you see like a little cutscene with a Mossad. That was a huge moment for me.
Okay,
Because
don't give spoilers because we're still doing that, and I know people.
Oh, I'm
and they don't
sorry.
know.
I'm sorry. Okay, well, there's a
I know
little
it's so
cutscene.
long after. I know it's so
years.
long after. I know it's so long after, but I'm trying to hold him.
Okay.
I'm trying to hold him.
I
I should have said
apologize.
that. No, it's not your fault. I should have said something.
Well,
It's been a long time.
Like to me, that was like the first raid where I like tried to clear it really early, and I like kind of raced for it, right? And I think we were the second team to clear it. Obviously, then like the big guilds weren't allowed to compete, right? But
Yeah.
like my team back then, we cleared it very early, and therefore I was one of the first people seeing like the cool story bits hidden behind it. And that was just really cool, right? That felt like a reward that transcended in-game items in a way, like because I now felt like I had seen something really special, and that would make me go to friends like, I know something that you don't know. Right? That's it was cool. It was cool, and like the way that initially the living world and the raid story kind of interacted with each other. You know how they were like parallel stories that kind of intersected at the end. Without giving away any spoilers, that was very cool.
It would be fine in any other stream, but just because we're going for it ourselves, and I know there's people who love like learning it as we go.
That's cool.
It's just a very weird thing. It might sound funny, but I'm conscious of that. Awesome. Okay, last one. We're going. Some of the questions I put on this doc don't really make sense because I think we know why they kind of stopped kind of producing wings for now. I would say I'm part of me feels like they're going to release something, but I'm not sure. Or think about it in the future.
I hope so.
Okay, so strike missions. Was there a trailer? Oh yes, there is.
That was a great announcement event.
It was the prologue. Wait, did Strikes came out before the event though? Didn't they? Did they?
No. It was like the first one, right?
Yeah.
It's like the prologue introduced the first strike.
Yeah, but was it the did they have Strikes?
The Christmas event used strike technology.
Yes. Yeah, that was the first one.
But it
Okay,
wasn't like the first official strike mission.
It wasn't
Like the
defined
snowman.
as that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
People called it the Christmas raid before they called it the Christmas
exactly
strike.
because that was the comparison they had. Yeah. But if you go to on the Guild Wars 2 wiki, it's it's kind of a strike, so it really depends on what you think. But yeah, exactly right, Criff. The Christmas strike raid thingy is the first official thing, and I think that was the tester because the next one that came out was a year later almost. So Strikes launched technically Christmas patch 2018 with the Christmas one, and then the first release after that was Shiver Peaks Pass September 17th 2019, so it was almost a year. Not a year, but like 8-9 months.
Mm-hmm.
I do have trailer here. There was one for the Christmas, but it was a very, very brief one. Oh no, that's the raid. Oops. Let me see. There we go. It was Iceberg Saga prologue called Bound by Blood. So this was before the whole thing, really. Was the Christmas strike good? Did you enjoy the Christmas strike?
I actually really enjoyed it. Yeah. It was
it's cool
interesting
on many different levels,
content.
Yeah.
For a
kind of like
festival
that.
in particular. Yeah.
I think
like
I
the
was like,
flavor of it.
I think I was slightly disappointed by it because everyone was calling it the Christmas raid, so I was like really expecting like a raid. But I think it was like, a nice way to introduce this sort of content to a lot of people. There's a lot of people who like to do festivals, and who don't really do the instant stuff too much. So I thought it was good.
I thought it was great as well. Just because, adding like when you're a raider, you always want to think about stuff that makes more people get, develop that same kind of love you have for raids, and it definitely felt like adding raid-like content into a festival. Where a lot of players that typically aren't raiders, would get to do it and maybe get a taste for it. See that this is not actually content that automatically hates you if you consider yourself a casual player, right? That's I think that's very cool, and that's why I really like that integration there. And yeah. Although I'm not sure, like if you call it the first strike mission now, right? Because we basically know that that's been developed that was like a project of an intern or something, right? Initially. I'm not sure that was them thinking, hey, we're experimenting with a new format. That was basically a little project to add something to Christmas. And
again, it's one of those things, right? We don't know unless they tell us. It's just I guess it's fun to be like.
I think there's actually been some info about this somewhere.
Maybe.
I think
I'll
I've
have
read.
to find it.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't, lean too far out of the window for that one either. But, Yeah, I never perceived it as like the precursor to strike missions later, right? It felt more like it was something they did, and later they did something that was similar. And
I
really,
mean-
if you think about it, Snowy wasn't even the same thing as strikes were originally said to be. Strikes originally was said to be an individual boss fight with no events attached to it at all. But Snowy does have a fairly lengthy pre-event to it, so it doesn't actually fit the definition of the initial strike mission. And they deviated from that later, right? Later they added one that's mind-numbingly long. Oh my god, why would they add that?
Is that the one with the char fighting all over the place?
Yeah, with the whole escort the tank for 7 hours and then
I
try
wouldn't
to break
consider
the
that a
break
strike
bar.
mission, though.
Is that a strike
But
mission?
it is.
Is it?
It
It is an
is.
actual strike
It's not
mission, I think,
technically.
but-
It's the same technology, but it's not. They've
But it is if you
classified
go
that as a
to-
vision of the past because it's particularly the scrying pool and not necessarily the strike mission portal.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was a strike mission.
Let's look at strikes on
Per
the
se.
Guild Wars 2
And
wiki.
then-
This is my
but
my
after
Bible.
that, there was another
People
strike
call
mission
it a
that was
strike mission.
the one after that, the one that's basically a big defense invasion event with a number of
Yeah.
little boss fights. That's a technical strike
like
mission,
no
right?
quarter.
Because-
Coleslaw,
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
called.
Okay.
Because I'm
Oh,
like
yeah,
the
Cold
entire point being that they like more and more deviated from the original formula of
I
what a
mean,
strike
did they
mission
really
is, right?
I like that though.
Did they just like kind
I like that
of
one.
because the very first strike mission had a really long jumping puzzle.
You're actually right, yeah.
It's not
did
too
have
It's like-
long.
jumping puzzle.
I just suck at it.
It can take
It's
time.
not.
Like if
It's
you
long for
suck at it.
me.
No, you're actually right. You're actually right. You're actually right. You're actually right.
I think
about
they
that.
might have just misbranded it
much.
because like I actually would have preferred if they stuck with the one boss, one room situation because it's faster. It introduces people to raid like content. And I liked the other ones that followed the very first one that were like you just teleport into a room and you have a boss that you have to fight.
Yeah.
I think the simplicity in that is it's
I like
clear and it's concise and you get the
Mhm.
job done and there are
Yeah.
rewards attached to it.
I haven't done them
Yeah.
that much, if I'm honest. I
That's
did
the thing.
I did all of them in a row like a couple of weeks ago. It's the first time I've ever done like a couple of them, and it was just more of a like you have to be this and you have to know how to do that. And I kind of scammed my way in. I just lied. I was like, yeah, I've done this before. I just lied. It was fine. I died a lot, but it was okay. I think they kind of knew.
Did you fake kill proof? Did you ping a chat
No,
code of 100
they didn't
doom
ask for proof. They were just like, you know, tell us the builders, and I'm like, I know the builds, so, you know, it's not that difficult. And they
I'm
just,
playing a meta build.
and
yes.
we did it. Yeah, I mean, it was fine. I mean, I got through it and did it and enjoyed it, but I was like, you know, I really don't want to do this every day, because I'm just playing through it, and I would rather do it with a bunch of friends and fail a load of times, and that's just how I enjoy things. You know, that's my enjoyment. They enjoy that.
And you know, I wanted to say that earlier. I really respect that, right? I think a lot of people don't dare to actually prog something anymore, right? A lot of people want to like sit in, like a lot of people join the training Discord, and at the end of the day, they just want to clear the content. They don't want to prog the content.
Yeah.
They just want some experienced commander to tell them what to do. And at the end of the day, somebody will come in on a heel scourge and just finish the job for them, you know, like. And a lot of people deprive themselves of exactly that experience you're describing, which is what makes raids fun. It's going in and doing it with friends and not being good at it and getting better at it, right?
Yeah, I've definitely enjoyed that a lot more, for sure.
I think the best experience is to just have like 10 people and everyone is new, you know, like just learning it together, bashing your head into the wall over and over till you figure it out. And then it feels so good when you get the kill.
That's when it's like, yeah, that's the best moments I've had. And again, you know, if people enjoy that and you listen to this and thinking, I'd rather do, you know, just getting in there and killing it, and that's absolutely fine as well. But I agree with you, Laura. Like, that's where I have the most enjoyment for sure, and that's why I guess Spirit Veil was kind of my favorite, because of that memory with you know, some peeps, and it was it was
I feel
very
like
good.
everyone's first Spirit Veil kill, if you played at launch, was just like
It's
you're
really
like,
hard.
I've seen the light.
It reminded me of other games though, where I've got first kills. You know, Rift was a big one where we killed like Greenscale and like other first boss kills. Like I still remember in Rift, like my favorite dungeon of raid was like Hammernow, and it was this really difficult, really intense mechanics. Like people were comparing it as some of the best raiding ever in an MMORPG. If you never played Rift, I feel bad for you. Because it was fucking amazing.
Rest in peace.
It was so good. It was the rating was just so decent, and then it went pay to win and messed it up. But
I hate it. Now I can't see. I was just thinking maybe I should go back and try that sometime, and then you.
I mean, you can. You just won't.
You can't really.
They
have
did
that genuine experience.
They did do a really, really good thing though. Actually, they did something where you can go and experience the raid story, but as a solo player, and you just kill the bosses as a single player, and they've got mini mechanics in there. It's not difficult. You just go in there.
There's multiplayer.
You can play it as a party, right?
Yeah, you can actually just like instantly queue, and it just gathers a bunch of people, and then you go through the raid.
Oh, like as normal? In Rift?
As like an instant adventure. I think that's what they were called.
Adventure.
Right?
Yeah. That's what they call it. Yeah. And you can experience the story that way. That's what I wanted them to do actually in Guild Wars 2, so you can experience the story. Just have like a simpler way for people to get that access, because otherwise it's pretty much just going to YouTube and just Google, like just searching for cutscenes or whatever, or watching a stream, and it's unfortunate. I just still have your Rift Collector's Edition. I never got that. I didn't realize it was going to be so good when I played it. I played it beta and it was like, all right. Anyway, let's talk about Rift. Oh, I miss you. So is this a better? Is this? So the main question about this really is this the answer to raids for more of the player base of Guild Wars 2? And are strikes the thing that they should continue to really focus on apart from raids? And is strikes raids at 1.2, or is it a raid? Is it something different and extra for different players? I don't know what to call it. 2.0, whatever. I don't know. Why do you think they brought strikes in, and what was their intention, and why did they stop maybe raid production? Does anyone want to add?
I think originally they did like mention that they wanted to create sort of a ramp up towards raids. That was like a big public thing they were like open about. And I think they kind of succeeded in a way, to be honest, because a lot of the like raid people I meet nowadays who got like into it more recently, a lot of them like started with strikes.
Interesting.
So I think that was like a successful thing, and something I like to do is when I'm with a group of new people, I usually start with strikes, and then a lot of people are in those groups who've never done anything like that. A lot of them get like excited about like raids and 10-man content and stuff. So I think strikes are a success, in my opinion at least. But at the same time, there are some statistic I feel about how many people played raids, and it was like surprisingly very, very low. I think it was something like 10-20% or something. I'm not actually sure if strikes will make that much of a difference, because I do think that there's just a lot of people who don't really want to like get into the more difficult content. They're kind of just like content playing the sort of easy stuff, and they're not as excited to like try to get into that stuff. So I think strikes are really cool, but at the same time I feel like a raid easy mode might have been like a solution to make more people enjoy raids. To make sure more people have access to that sort of content. I like strikes though. It's just I feel like a lot of the bad feelings a lot of raiders have about strikes is because they feel like strikes replaced raids.
Yeah.
Which in fairness they sort of ended
like
doing,
once
right?
strikes started coming in, we didn't get any more raids.
But I'm gonna let Groove talk first because I feel like I'll go on a tangent.
Smart choice.
Or was it?
Sorry.
Was it a smart?
No.
I don't.
I would agree. I think strikes succeeded in some areas, but I think ultimately there's no point in having a ramp if the ramp isn't going to lead anywhere. If you're not going to lead into it with a new raid to kind of have that seamless progression. Yes, you can go back, but because it's classified as older content, it would have probably helped if they released like 1 or 2 strikes and then a raid to kind of like have a follow through of like they're almost guiding the community, being like, this is how it works. But because they didn't do that, as we now know, and
that might have been their intention, though. I think Laura's right. Like, you're definitely right, Laura, what you were saying. But yeah, I think, I see what you're saying, Griff. Yeah.
I think there was just maybe a little lack of follow through on the end game side of it. But when strike missions first came out, I would probably say that I didn't really like them too much. But because it's kind of what we've gotten, I wouldn't mind seeing more strike missions if they went the route of having like almost like other games. Like I think Blade and Soul does like a tower system where like you go through a bunch of bosses, or like each floor is a boss and you just keep going almost. I think that would be kind of cool to do like with a strike mission, perhaps. But it seems to be like easier to implement into the game. It's definitely not a raid, but I think just Guild Wars 2 has a difficult time with synthesizing the different types of content that they have, because there's so many different types. And if I feel like they should just like stick with one and then really just go with that. And I think they did that with strike missions, and I've ended up liking them. So I think maybe for End of Dragons, if they include the Legendary Armory, which could be an incentive to do raids, if they stick with raids, stick with that. If they stick with strike missions, stick with that. If they stick with fractals, stick with that. And really like let it flourish. I said a lot. I hope that was clear.
That's okay. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually. I actually think strike missions are like a great addition to the game in general. The format strike mission, I think, is amazing. Right? It's like it's a way to basically recycle a story boss into an instance file that leads people from story, from open world into more raid-themed content. I think that's great. But Guild Wars 2 just kind of implemented it in a not great way, in my opinion. In my opinion, they don't actually teach you raids that well. A lot like the way that the bosses work out to be, they're basically just raid bosses. There are some raid bosses that are more difficult. There are some raid bosses that I consider easier than some strike mission bosses. And in a way, it doesn't feel like a real ramp. It feels like a roller coaster, right? It feels like there's no actual difficulty progression. It feels like if you start on the wrong strike mission, you're basically starting as you would if you started in Wing 4, right? Like, and in a way, I don't think they replace difficulty settings. I think that's kind of the big trick they're missing in all of this, right? It's like, because Final Fantasy has the exact same thing, but you can, in Final Fantasy, I would say you can very clearly see the steps in difficulty. You'll have a normal mode strike mission, and let's say that one has a stack marker or something, right? Then that stack marker will have much bigger effects and will tell you exactly how many people need to be in it or something, you know? Like, let's say that has a big AoE where the boss does a big fist swing or something. And the easy mode, that will have a huge AoE in the ground that's flashy and red, and it's when you stand in here and you will die. And if you stand in it, you will die. But if you do stand in it, well, you had like 10 seconds to think about whether you want to stand in the big red flashy field or not, right? And Guild Wars 2 doesn't have that. Guild Wars 2 just throws you in with the regular mechanics as any other boss has. It doesn't have this intro thing where it kind of like dumps the fight down a little bit and makes it easier to understand, and then later give you basically the same fight, but without all of these tells, without where you just have to look at the boss and see when he raises his arm to predict the swing is coming, right? So that's something they're missing in a way. And I think in a lot of ways they ended up to just be heal cheesable. Like you don't actually go into a strike mode to learn a mechanic. You just go in and you stack more healers and then you just face tank everything the same way.
But is
so
that,
in a way,
is that like a same thing? Whereas like where you've got that's something you have to queue for and look for though, as similar to Raid, right? Where you just kind of go in and farm it. Like there's the
most people do that though, right? Like the majority of people, I don't think you'll find a Bone Skinner group that will actually do mechanics.
If you do,
just the mechanics.
Unless you're going in there with like a group of friends or that haven't done it, right, like kind of.
True.
I don't even know the mechanics, and I've done it like literally 100 times.
I think Bone Skinner might be an example of a boss that was designed to be too difficult to the point where they don't want to do the mechanics of what was intended because just healing through it is so much easier. So I think it's nice to have difficulty, and I know a lot of people want it, but maybe they should have kind of like rolled a little bit back for Bone Skinner, just because
I think there's like
at that point you don't want to do mechanics.
There's like another dimension to difficulty, right? You can like difficult is like the big broad term that kind of envelops it all. But within difficulty, you can have so many shades of that, right? Like you can add difficulty by just having a ticking debuff that does 10k damage every 2 seconds, right? That's difficulty, but it's also incredibly boring, and it leads to you just stacking 5 more healers, right? It doesn't. It's not really engaging difficulty. So it's something that I wanted to see, right, is something that actually I would consider introduces you to raids, would be to take a raid mechanic and then kind of strip it down to something that's an introduction to that raid mechanic, right? Let's say there is a
tutorial versions of bosses or something.
Yeah. Say there was a strike mission for Samurog and you wanted to introduce a player to the whole knockback wave mechanic, then the easy mode mechanic to that for me would be a much even longer wind-up, literally 10 seconds long. It's so long that you can't miss it, and all the time there's like a flashy little sign or something on the ground that indicates that there's going to be an AoE here soon, right? And then make that wave have like some little arrow pointing over it, literally make it that.
Final Fantasy made Guild Wars 2.
So I tell you what, like a lot of this would actually be probably, and this is where it becomes a debate and a different subject, and I think this is where it becomes a thing where having add-ons, and that's another podcast probably, is something where in World of Warcraft you get deadly boss mods or whatever, and it's like these kinds of things actually really 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 help new players. And actually in World of Warcraft as well, they do little mini guides sometimes on the bosses, and they talk about the mechanics, and they've got it inside the game. And there are things I feel like they could do to help players to kind of introduce and bring them. But I like that idea actually, Rocco, of like having bosses specifically and being like trend, like within maybe the dummy kind of area where you're testing DPS, like having like a Samurog dummy, and you can access maybe the mechanics and be like, how do you do, like, what's the mechanic, blah blah blah.
It would be a perfect opportunity for a bestiary. And then for the
I would straight up copy how Final Fantasy does it. Make the easy mode mandatory to enter the harder mode. And then the easy mode is basically a mechanical introduction to the harder mode. And the easy mode is basically, it's actually at this point in Final Fantasy, they do it very much so that they will always add like a major mechanic to the more difficult fight. But a lot of the mechanics in easy mode are the same ones as in the harder mode, but with a lot more tell, with a lot more AoEs shining to show you that this will hit you. But at the same time, if you do stand in it, it will kill you, right? You can wipe. Like, you can't just face tank it all because it's easy mode and you can just play more healers. It will, you are forced to learn it in a way, but it's made so easy, It's like teaching a kid not to cross the street when there's a lot of traffic. Like, make him do that wrong once, right? You won't make that mistake again in a way, right? Like, but it's...
I have a perpetual fear of cars ever since.
You know what's the crazy thing, though? I feel like they sort of recently did this in a way, because one of their last big like endgame releases was Sunqua Peak challenge modes, and that whole Fractal consists of like different bosses, and each boss is basically one mechanic that comes back at the final boss. So you go for like one boss that teaches you to jump up, you go for a boss that teaches you about like the meteors, and then the final boss kind of combines this stuff together. And that's also just about Fractals in general. I really like that Fractals has these skills, I really wish that we would have something like that to gradually introduce people to stuff. I feel like they're, they know about this sort of stuff though. With like Veil Guardian, like at the start, they have like the free things that sort of introduces. I just wish they'd apply it more,
Yeah,
like
I just wish it would be a more general thing, right? I did an analogy once a while ago where I jokingly drew up a difficulty ladder for each game, right? And in Final Fantasy, you can very clearly say each step of the ladder, right? You can say easy mode dungeons, easy mode strike mission, easy mode trial boss, and so on. And in Guild Wars 2, you have some of the ladders be incredibly close to each other, and then there'll be a huge gap to each other, and then the first ladder will come up again because it's actually partially, parts of it are harder than that, It's and it ends up being like just a wonky road, kind of. It lacks that stable, gradual progress in a way.
Thinking about it as well, Yeah, ESO does that as well. Something similar to Final Fantasy. They have like the normal version of a dungeon, and then they have the veteran, and they do that with raids as well. And actually, they're called trials in the ESO. And in trials in the ESO, you can actually get into them at level 10, which is not the highest level that you can be. So you can actually go in there and you get buffed up in terms of power, and you get an experience of trials. I think you can go in technically before that as well, but like you won't have many skills or anything, but you can still do the raid. And then the veteran version is obviously where you know it's a lot tougher, but the mechanics are still there, but they're not as hard hitting. They don't destroy you, so you're actually able to like maybe learn, but I don't think they're the best way to learn. But they definitely have that difficulty scale. Whereas, like, you're right, there is no like easy mode dungeon like raid specifically. It's just like, here is the thing, and then there's the challenge mode, and it's like, okay,
In a way,
I
it's
think
like
what
I don't.
this.
Yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry. Go ahead.
No, what were you
Darn
gonna say?
discourse.
No,
No, but
okay.
I feel like to sort of sum these things up, how I think about it now, just listening to all of you, I feel like Strikes did a fantastic job at like giving people a taste of what it's like and maybe giving them some interest. But maybe they didn't really do as much of a good job actually teaching people like how to play that sort of content. I think
It's
that's
good that they're there, but they're like, I think they're just like 20% of what they could or should be in a way.
right.
So what we're saying is that there was an intention with Strikes, but that isn't essentially what it ended up being.
I don't think it's done as well of a job as it would have been great as I would have hoped it would, you know. And as I think the intention was of them being.
I think it's difficult.
I would agree.
I feel like that's probably.
It's like a mean complaint of mine, right? Because like you can always complain about something not being as good as it could be, but I think in this case it's just like a real.
I don't think you're.
Like
I don't think it's like out of the. I think a lot of people we've just all kind of agreed with you. So I don't think it's not the usual thing to say. Like it's not like it's not being mean about the game or anything like that. I think it's it's something else they tried with the intention of doing something and they didn't get there, so maybe they're going to try something else in the future, or maybe like a lot of people play that content and it's actually an additional thing which people do enjoy and farm, and that's make it successful in a different way. It doesn't mean it's bad necessarily. It just means it maybe didn't meet the requirements of what they actually were intended to do with it in the first place, which is unfortunate. But sometimes it's people play Strikes more than they play raids. I mean, they've got to. You see permanently groups up, people just jumping
haven't they like kind of really like hasn't the activity there gone down quite a bit? I think because I don't really play the game actively and I haven't since
I don't
Strikes
know.
were
I know
released.
that people will go
I
in there.
think people have told me that
I would
they've
imagine
quieted
when
down a
Dragon
lot.
Response missions came out,
Oh,
people kind of fell off that
That's the
strike
thing.
mission chain.
Maybe I should have put Dragon Response missions in as well, because there's another
They
one.
do not count.
don't
I mean,
know.
I think ultimately, if I were to summarize, and I kind of just realized this, I don't know if anyone else shares this, but like Icebrute Saga was a season where they tested and tampered with so many instanced storytelling. I feel like this season has been so drastically different than any of the others, really, for like the things that they've been trying to mess around with. There has been so much story that has been tied
That's
to
the next
public
podcast, Criff. Don't
instances.
do that. That's literally the next podcast.
There's even
but I-
going to be a new one on Tuesday.
Dragon Response
Wow.
missions.
Proof we
But I
said
feel
no
like with Dragon
spoilers
Res-
on this podcast.
Good
But I
lord,
feel
that's the
like
next
Dragon Response
podcast.
missions-
Save it.
I don't-
I'm not
I feel like
inviting
Dragon
Criff now.
Response missions, they aren't necessary. I wouldn't classify them as endgame content. I think it's just them trying to figure out how to tell the story.
Yeah.
I wish I
Yeah.
could say something, but I've literally never even played one. Like
I could
I've played-
literally ramble about this for like 2 hours. So I'm not going to do that. But I agree.
Well, then that's good, because it's going to be a podcast on DRMs. Not maybe. It might be next week, actually, after the latest one, but maybe the week after. But yeah, new content means the death of old content. I think with raids, I think in a way that is pretty true for most of the things, but at least I think they do a good job at making other stuff rewarding enough to go and do that. Like I'm thinking of like meta events where you need stuff for where you can farm like the check stuff, you can get the legendary stuff, you still need to get the infinite amount of currencies there are out there for different things and weapons and skins and and everything else. So I think there's a lot of stuff to do in the game. I think a lot of the time maybe people don't know what to do and where to go unless they've got a specific goal in mind. But I don't know. I think we're probably gonna kind of wind up right now because we've been going for like 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I know it's my fault. I started to write this up and then think about it, and I was like, oh, God damn.
I always think it's a good thing when you end up going a little bit longer. It kind of means that the discussion was engaging.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Or you talk. Wait, I put way too much stuff in this. I probably could have done a podcast on each one and saved myself some topics for the future, but it's okay.
We're gonna fight. Let's go.
No fight.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Is there anything else we need to say about strikes? I don't think so. I think that's going to be the future. What do we think the future? Do you think they're going to stick with Right. So I'm going to end it with a couple of questions. Are we going to have more raids? Do we think that's going to be a thing, or is it that they've said that they're kind of not, and that's going to be it? What do you reckon, peeps? We're going to have more raids? Chat, what do you think?
I think so. I think we'll
so
get
too.
more raids. I feel like, at least like with End of Dragons, I feel like they want to, just make sure everyone is kind of happy and excited. Like now, it would be the perfect time to release a raid. Like, I don't know, like a month after the expansion or something. So I hope that's happening. Maybe my hopes are too high, but I feel like we'll get some End of Dragons raids. I actually think strikes might be done. I'm not sure if they'll add more strikes. To me, it feels like, they've sort of stepped away from it for a bit. I'm not sure if they'll return to it.
Oh, God.
They wanted to make a ramp, and it's kind of done, I guess.
Maybe.
I know.
Maybe.
I feel like they'll go back to raids.
That's true. Good point.
I feel like they will too.
You don't think they'll ever? Ever?
Go ahead. Yeah. I don't think they'll ever have a focus on raids again.
Okay.
I don't think the game will ever be a game. I don't think they'll ever commit to like one raid a day ever again. I think they'll maybe do one more to wrap it up and have one that's Kenta themed, maybe 2, depending on how long stuff goes. But I don't think there'll ever be. There will never be a focus. There has never been, and there will never be a focus on raids in Guild Wars 2 to that extent where I'd be happy with it. And yeah, maybe they'll do strikes, but I don't think, maybe 1 or 2, but never to the point where you'd actually, and I think that's the big problem, never to the point where you actually like kind of keep the community happy in a way, right? Because you can throw a dog a steak once every month and that dog will still be hungry most of the time, right? Even though that steak is good, right? It doesn't
it's weird
sustain
analogy.
that. Sorry, I know I'm not terrible with analogies. Okay, it's just like it doesn't like. There's a reason that the community is as small as it is, and it's not just that people aren't getting into raids or that the letters are not. It's because every raider at some point stops because waiting 9 months for the new content you care about isn't enough, and that's why raids will never work unless they actually improve that cadence. And no matter how good they are, they will never be that good, right? Like because of just that reason, I think. So I think, and I think they see that. I think they see that raids haven't super worked for them, and the amount of dedication it would take to make Guild Wars 2 a game that raiders feel at home in is more than they would ever want to. Commit to, so maybe they'll do 1 or 2 to appease the existing raid community to, maybe stop people from being quite as negative about the game, because a lot of negativity comes from that crowd, right? But I don't think the game will ever be a raid game in that sense, right? So strikes fit that formula better. I could rather see them put out a strike every patch in a way than a raid.
I would agree. That I feel like they could do probably like 2 strike missions. It's weird because are they going to do fractals? Are they going to do dungeons? There's a lot of like categories that they could start to bulk up with the expansion. But I kind of agree with Lara as well, mostly because of the legendary armory. I think if they're going to try to sell the legendary armory as like a marketable thing for people to get into the expansion. I don't know how it's going to be tied, if it's going to be locked behind the expansion or if it's going to be a feature. Either way, but I think with a legendary armory on the horizon, it would probably be better to at least try to invigorate the raid community a little bit. And by doing that would probably be adding at least one more raid or two. I don't think it will have to depend if they do put out a raid and it is very well received and it was very well crafted, then they could probably still go with that. I mean, we did see like the drought period, the raids really kept the game going. And then they stopped that. And then they lost the community.
I do want to add in that I think almost every raid has been well polished, and almost every raid has been well received in general. If you think about Wing 5 or like the Kadim raid, people, you know, what was like going nuts about how pretty the raid is, right? Wing 6, I mean, and Wing 5, you know, I think in general people receive raids pretty well. And
yeah, so I'm not concerned about like the execution of it, because following the track, there's always a possibility where it might not. But I guess it's ultimately up to them and what they want to do.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they tend to go to other things and then leave a section of the game a little dry for a while.
The reason why I'm always skeptical about this is because as a player of the format and a fan of the format of raids, I always feel like you're being appeased, like you're being told, oh, it's on the table, don't quit the game quite yet. Who knows? Maybe, you know, but you always feel like you can't really trust it, you can't really believe in it, and you can't really get hopeful about it, because you'll only kind of get disappointed in a way, right? So like, I'm not ever gonna hope for Guild Wars 2 to put a focus on this anymore, right? Because I just feel like it's not, you know, it's too unlikely in a way to really, put a lot of hopes on it, if that makes sense. That's why I kind of dislike the whole, it's not out of the question kind of thing. And in a way, I'd almost rather have them say, no, we're done with it. Prepare for strike missions. We're going to do strikes.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think until they say, I mean, I think they've said in some way that they're not focusing on raids at the moment, or, you know, there's not really a focus on the future. That kind of put into my head that they're not going to, but at the same time...
Bobby Stein, he reacted to a Reddit or like a post or something where he said that they're not working on anything at the time, but that they're still on the table and that they're not ruling them out as future content.
Yeah. I think they said that about strike missions as well.
Yeah. And that's such a unsatisfying answer, and it's a good answer, right? Because I wouldn't blame Bobby for saying that, right? Because that's probably the way they think about it too, right? I don't fully distrust that. It's kind of an unsatisfying answer in a way, because it leaves you wondering always, right? It leads you, it makes you always think
as well.
Yeah, exactly. It always keeps you lukewarm. And
it's better than being like no. I mean, if you got to think about it,
I'd rather. I mean, I've kind of made that cut myself, right? I'd rather become active somewhere else then, or
yeah. Well,
or
that's
just
the thing. That's the thing, though. They want to keep you. They want to keep you. Right? They want to keep you on the hook.
But do they though? Because in other aspects of the game, it's almost like the game is marketed as a game that you put down and pick back up later, right? So why do they want to keep me? And that, right, that those two things don't really add up to me.
They haven't, have they? So there is that. That's the thing. That's the thing. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, and I think almost as well, you can't ever say that they're not going to do a thing, because they said they won't do a thing in the past, even before launch. We will not have expansions, we will not have raids. They said that.
True.
They said that. So like, even if they said it, I wouldn't believe them. So it would still, so even if they said that, I'd just be like, well, I don't gotta believe you, because you said this in the past, and you did it anyway. So I think one thing with Marine that I've learned specifically is never to think like they won't do a thing, because I was like, they're not going to do another expansion because of the way they've been talking about things, and they didn't for a long time, and then this year End of Dragons, and I was like very surprised that they were going to do that. But a lot of things changed in the company. I think Mike O'Brien left, and I think no disrespect to him at all, but I think that was a very good thing for ArenaNet. I think that they changed the direction. Mike Z went in there. He did good work while he was there until he left for Amazon, and I'm not sure who's at the top now. I'm not sure if anyone knows specifically, but I feel like their ideas. I think like stuff. I mean, does anyone know?
Maybe a good way to maybe
Mysterious
reiterate.
company.
A good way to reiterate, maybe it's more. It's not that I wouldn't say that there definitely won't be one. It's just that I don't want to dare hope for one in a way.
Yeah, you don't want to be disappointed, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely fine.
We'll get what we get, and we may or may not throw a fit.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think the expansion is going to be a big, Ender Dragons, and there's people thinking it's branching into something else, and they're gonna have more expansions and stuff down the line. Maybe that's going to be the next MMO. What's going to happen? Who the flip knows until it comes out. But for now, we have these instances, and this is what we got. There is a lot of different stuff you can do. That is for sure. You can do dungeons, you can do fractals, you can do raids, or you can do strikes. You can still do dungeons if you get some people together and you go and do it. There's some people still playing dungeons as well. You don't think that's why I quit? No, he went to Amazon. That's
like that person who elbowed me back in 2018.
Definitely didn't quit because you're elbow. It's okay.
I'll show that person.
I'm gonna go do it.
Punctured his kidney real quick.
That would be funny if it was. And DRMs, yeah, there's loads of stuff. There's World v World. There's definitely a lot to do in Guild Wars 2, and people do say, maybe Guild Wars 2 is for the more casual player. I would argue that sure, but you can still play Guild Wars 2 in many hardcore ways. There's PvP, there's World v World, there is Fractals, there's CM dungeons, you just play the game, play what you're enjoying. That's what matters.
There's playing music in Divinity's Reach for 6 hours a day. I can highly recommend that one.
There you go. And you can always, there is this thing where, pick up the game for the living story and you put it back down again. At least they're picking it up again. What I would say is the positive to take from that, I guess. But yeah, you want people to keep playing that and I think Axis is always the thing that's on my mind. And I think about, that's probably because of what, mental health and stuff like that. But Axis is a big thing in gaming as well. Being able to play the stuff so that it continues to be successful is a very important thing, and they're still working that out, people. Okay, we're gonna end it there. Is there anything?
Marvel Pop.
Yes, indeed. Is there anything anyone wanted to close out with on the whole discussion of instances and stuff very quickly? Is there anything anyone wanted to talk about that we haven't? I don't think there is much else.
I think we kind of hit it all, didn't we?
There's a lot.
Any
Pretty
closing
thorough.
statements?
You might say we got a full crit. I don't know.
Well, I would like to go back to the topic of dungeons and reiterate.
Oh my god!
I think we did a full clear just now.
Oh!
Oh!
Winner.
Intelligentsia.
Okay, right, we're going to end it there. Okay, thank you to my guests for today's very, very awesome podcast. I appreciate it very much. LightBringers episode 12. We had Kroof, Rocker, and Lara. Last time, we're going to say, where do you do your things? Where can we find you? Twitter, Twitch, whatever you want to advertise for yourself. Kroof, let us know. When do you do it?
I'm going, okay.
Hi, first again. Hi, my name's Kroof. I do a lot of YouTube stuff. You can find me at Kroof.
I do some Twitch things as well. I'm also on Twitter sometimes. And I'm
What is
really
your
excited
Twitter?
about Under Dragons. So
You have to
Yay.
you can't just say I do these things sometimes without saying your actual I do. Like, what is it? Twitch.tv/
I guess I should brush up on my marketing,
just
I guess.
Google Kroof.
You can find me at Kroof, just KROOF in the English language. And you can find me at Twitch on /Kroof Gaming with an underscore at the end of it. Because someone, I guess, has the name Kroof, and I'm going to find them. And I will kill them. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm a very pacifist person, but, we work around it.
Thank you, Kroof, for being here once again. Legend. Rocker, What do we do? What do you do? Do you do the things where you do them if you want? You sell that kind of stuff that you do? What do you think?
Well, I don't really do much anymore. I'm the disgruntled raid veteran guy that occasionally rants on Twitter nowadays. So other than that, I love to be on the occasional podcast, but really go follow these guys instead. I'm not sure what corner of the stream I'm actually in, but everybody else, go follow them. They're going to provide you with a lot more content than me. But I guess you could join my Discord if you like to talk about games and stuff. We do still talk about stuff there occasionally.
Cool, awesome.
But yeah,
do it.
That's pretty much it.
Do it. Rocker's good people. Appreciate you being here as well, my friend. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. And then Lara, you want to tell us about all the things you do, where you do it, what the channel address is?
I stream like 5 times a week usually as twitch.tv/Renancy. I stream Guild Wars 2 usually, sometimes Guild Wars 1, sometimes other stuff. Mostly Guild Wars 2 though. And I'm also on YouTube on youtube.com/Lorenancy. Nice and easy. I wanted that name on Twitter as well, but it was taken. So on Twitter I'm Lara_IRL. If you're interested in my IRL. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed being on this podcast. It's like a good experience.
Yes, and I will definitely give you all a shout again in the future to talk about the things. Otherwise, I am Jebro. You can find me at twitch.tv/JebroUnity. Jebro is taken. Unity is the name of my guild. And also on other places, youtube.com/JebroUnity. Same on Twitter. Same in all the places. Instagram, just Jebro, I think, whatever. But otherwise, go and check out the past podcasts as well. If you wanted to watch this live in future, it's every 2 weeks on a Friday. Today again is the 23rd of April, so work out when the next one is, around the 8th or so. Otherwise, the next one's probably going to be on Dragon Response missions or something around the next patch, which is coming out, which is kind of the end one, the finale. Otherwise, it's been episode 12, I think. I'm probably saying it wrong every single time. Everyone can give away. 12. I think so. Well, the title says 12, but whether or not that's the actual case, there's another thing. We're going to give you a wave goodbye. And then I'm going to come back.
Bye, Ron.
See ya.
Thank you for watching.
Goodbye.
Oh my god. Oh dear. Let me just play this Path of Fire music as we go away. Thank you for watching the latest episode of the LightBringers Guild Wars 2 podcast. We will see you soon. Bye bye.